subscribe to my sister's channel. She will also voice her favorite plots. Let's give her a big asset. Sasuke went over to the calendar that hung over his desk, and with a sigh tore off the leaf of the last winter month. The cold weather is over, although it didn't even begin in Konoha, and spring has come. The shinobi who had flown to the south returned. Sakura blossomed, flooding the village with its vigorous and too cloying smell. And the hormone level in the body jumped sharply. The body demanded love. At night, a whole cat concert was going to the windows, reminding Uchiha that it was time to leave the ranks of virgins and finally become a man. And then it's not good for a handsome man of the whole world, the most enviable groom and just a cool shinobi to go in girls, or rather in boys that he is already 16 years old. There's a whole war behind my back. And he still locks himself in his room, takes a photo of the only one and, in general, sighs for the friend zone, in which he was unconditionally assigned. "You are my best friend," she always repeats when she wraps Sasuke in a tight embrace, snuggling up to him with her big and insanely soft eyes. Uchiha wanted to say with his eyes, and not with what is just below. That's just every day it becomes more difficult and more painful to endure. Her hands are already arbitrarily grabbing her for inappropriate places when they train with each other. And over time, Uchiha learned to paw his girlfriend so skillfully and imperceptibly that she doesn't even notice anything. For his thoughts are constantly floating somewhere in distant clouds. And he uses it, listening attentively to her, and looking into the cut of the t-shirt in an attempt to understand what kind of underwear she wears. In general, the inveterate virgin has already gone crazy against the background of strong hormones are too naughty. And he can't do anything about it. After all, I want love and affection from that one. And whores, no, he's not like that. Its stamen is created for only one pistol. And so it will be until it breaks. And from today Sasuke intends to change the current situation and get his own, as they say, a new day is a new seduction tactic. Sighing, Uchiha crumpled up all his indecision and threw it in the trash, telling himself in his mind that it was time to take the goat by the horns. And in his case, the blonde for her too long tail. "What are you dreaming about, Ototo?" Leaning his head on his hand, Sasuke briefly looked at Itachi and Shisui who came up to him, after which he returned all his reverie back to Naruto. The girl, radiating universal positivity and joy, was standing near the cash register and talking about something violently with the owner of the cafe where she came with the topic. The guy sighed for the first time. How beautiful she is after all. And how did he not notice this before? After all, everything is perfect in Uzumaki. And the body of wow, any man will be indescribably delighted. And Sasuke, like a hero. At least now he can move the Hokage mountain from its place, well, if he eats a dozen ramen before that. And he won't even talk about her childish naivety. I would have just taken it and hugged it, of course. Well, why immediately think about the BAD.IN short, not a dream woman? That's just this dream considers him a friend. A friend, and he's not iron either. The patience will end soon, and he'll just go berserk. It's already starting. About Uzumaki, with a sigh, he stretched out and continued to examine the figure of his girlfriend. And there was something to see there. Apparently Naruto decided to remind each individual male that today is the first day of spring. Otherwise, how can one explain the presence of these short shorts and a topic on Uzumaki? After such an answer, Itachi and Shisui exchanged glances and, after a moment of silence, burst into deafening laughter. And then, under the general bewilderment, they grabbed the boy and dragged him to Mount Hokage. Somewhere where no one will stop them from talking. What are you doing? Sasuke muttered when he was forcibly seated on a rock. Is it that bad? Shisui slightly tilted his head and squinted his eyes in such slyness that the younger Uchiha instantly blushed like a girl. Well, yes, he is insanely ashamed that at such an age his friend still did not know the depths of women. Then there was no time for this, then he was simply dynamited. And so it turned out that he is still in the boys that nothing stuck. He quickly looked away, while nervously starting to sort through the fabric of his shirt. For to feel their piercing gazes on him was beyond his strength, but Itachi and Shisui continued to watch. Watch and be silent. To stand and stare at him, as if trying to get into the skull and find out what kind of thoughts are there. A cold drop rolled down his temple. Sasuke became even more nervous. His knee trembled treacherously, his gaze darted around in an attempt to find at least something that would help him distract himself. But they are still standing. They are silent. Waiting. And he is silent. And the degree of tension is growing. Her breathing quickens, her face blushes with embarrassment, and they don't even move. Freaks, yes, he shouted nervously, his eyes bulging like a madman. Yes, I'm already itching all over there. And she still doesn't look at me. And it's starting to get annoying. But I can't do anything, because I don't want to spoil our relationship. Infuriating. I hate it. And he exhaled noisily when, finally, he was able to speak out, and even somehow immediately felt better. Having blinked in confusion, the geniuses of the Uchiha clan opened their mouths and immediately slammed them shut when they simply could not find the right words. They did not think that everything was so neglected here. And why are you silent? Sasuke grinned madly, forcing the geniuses to immediately come to their senses. Yes, it's just, Shisui began and, having ruffled his hair, looked at his friend in supplication. He doesn't know what to say. Sighing, Itachi sat down next to his brother and, putting his hand on his shoulder, said in a confident voice, "We'll help you." "Hey, Naruto-chan, wait!" Uzumaki braked sharply when Shisui's loud voice came from behind. With a surprised grunt, the girl turned and tilted her head to the side in a silent question when the guy stopped a step away from her. And what could the genius of the Uchiha clan need from someone like her? "Invite me on a date," the Kurama growled mockingly, which made the women's cheeks tingle with a rush of embarrassment. "Don't be silly. He wouldn't look at me." She answered timidly and allowed a silly smile to touch her lips, and she doesn't mind this arrangement. Everyone can't wait for Shisui to ask her out. So that they would walk by the hand there, hug, and then drool over each other in the light of the moon. Romanced it, and where are you in a hurry?" He smiled charmingly, noticing a bunch of books in her hands. Did she really decide to take up her mind after the war? Commendable. Oh, this? Yes, I took it from Kakashi, she answered awkwardly and pressed the small compromising material harder to her chest. I should have put them in a bag. And then with such reading material on a crowded street to wander is not the best solution. With an interested mumble, Shisui snatched one of the books, causing everyone to fall to the ground at once. The blue eyes widened sharply in shock. He's going to see it now. What am I? It's not worth it. I'm on my own. And with all her might, she hit the guy on the back of the head with her forehead when they both began to lower to the ground. The couple hissed painfully and only by an effort of will managed to stay on their feet. "Naru-chan, why hit me like that?" He croaked plaintively and looked down at the flyleaf of the book that remained in his hands. Traditions of Kakurazato? Realizing that he paid attention to the most boring book, the girl quickly collected the remaining junk and smiled nervously. They almost burned it down. For general development. You can read it. And now come, Databayo, and like a little hurricane, she ran behind the building, saving her pride from shame. Because if someone finds out that she reads at night, it won't be very good. Naruto is a decent girl, she doesn't know anything about lemon at all. And she didn't even touch Jiraiya's books. Yeah. She's kind of weird, Shisui, puzzled, held out and stared at the book given to him in complete bewilderment. Fingers quickly flipped through this reading, and the eye suddenly caught an extremely entertaining tradition. A foxy smile appeared at the corners of his lips, and Uchiha, filled with enthusiasm, hurried back to the guys. Now he knows how to help Sasuke. I won't do it. The younger Uchiha stared in the deepest shock at the idiot who offered him such a thing. And what was I thinking when I expressed my simply brilliant idea out loud? What's wrong with that? Shisui asked in confusion, squinting at Itachi, who was busy near the stove. Well, it also seems to me that this is not the best solution, he replied with a note of skepticism, after which he turned off the boiling kettle. Are you sure Naru won't kill him later for this? Don't you remember that her arm is very heavy? Sasuke immediately nodded, remembering the last training session when Uzumaki almost punched his sternum with her fist. And he, the fool, stared at her face and missed the blow, finally making sure that Naruto was his woman. For you can lose yourself even in battle only because of the most. Well, then think for yourself, Shisui muttered resentfully, closing the book that the girl gave him. I want to help him. And he waved his hand at Sasuke and left the kitchen, leaving Itachi completely at a loss. And breakfast? He stretched out plaintively, pulling the plate with the omelette forward. After all, he cooked for his boys. And they treat him so cruelly. Well, no sympathy for the stronger sex who cares about them. Less than a second later, Shisui came back, took his portion and, grumbling thanks, retired to the living room again. And Itachi immediately smiled like a Cheshire cat, and did not notice how he began to burn the emptiness in front of him with a loving look. Ah, what a smart girl Shisui is after all. She doesn't want to upset Daddy. Oh, a friend. A friend, of course. Noticing his brother's condition, Sasuke intelligently mumbled and quietly stole the book that interested him. And then he tactfully left the house, so as not to interfere with these lovebirds. Apparently, he was not the only one who had a spring exacerbation. Sasuke sat down under a tree in the yard and began to read carefully about a very interesting tradition that could really help in his case. But it was based on one huge and fat minus: everything should be by mutual consent. And Naruto definitely won't give it. Therefore, but you can hide the details a little, he smiled mysteriously and flashed his black eyes. Someone will have very close and deep ties with the opposite sex tonight. There was a lemon, when Naruto was just 10 years old, a magazine with very beautiful and busty women suddenly fell into her hands. It happened completely by accident. I was walking down the street and noticed something bright and glossy on the bench. And since Naruto was a curious girl from birth and poking her nose everywhere, almost immediately this very nose was buried in an extremely entertaining picture. Lemon is the symbol of Kakurezato. A blonde with lush breasts and an open ass caused little positive emotions in the child, because at that age Naruto was only interested in one thing: how to fuck Konoha Shinobi harder. But when she entered the age of puberty, then, no, Uzumaki did not spy on ants with a fourth breast size. Her good grew. But the boys gradually began to arouse her quite lively interest. Especially Uchiha, but do not think it was far from Sasuke. She immediately disliked this little bastard. Because he had more conceit, brains, and again you thought about the wrong thing. The object of Naruto's sighing was, no, and once again no, not Itachi. For her, he was always exclusively an older brother, and sometimes a mom who tirelessly watched over her nutrition. And every time I noticed in her hands, I quote, the most disgusting filth that humanity could only come up with, then. Naruto then healed her ass from burns for a long time. For Itachi's accuracy and skill are not to be taken up, he always overtook her and, in general, gave out such breams that by the age of 14 Naruto began to be sick of ramen. Your ass is more expensive. Anyway, she was a frequent guest in the Uchiha house because of Shisui. Everything about this guy was perfect. And smart, and handsome, and strong. The only problem was that Shisui only saw her as a sister. But not the girl. Therefore, by her 17, Naruto remained in the old maidens, without a boyfriend and, her innocence, which was taken away from her in the most brazen way. Arg, but that's not the point now. Over time, interest in the opposite sex began to grow relentlessly. Yes, that's the trouble, all the males she knew or hated her, for the time being, now there is no end of fans. Or they were her friends. Or Sasuke. She couldn't call this bipedal creature a guy at all. Friend. Maybe a brother. But not the man who made her a woman. But now you have a boyfriend. From this comment, soaked through with malice and schadenfreude, Naruto suddenly shuddered. And then it forced me to cross myself and pray, to Jashin, in order to disown such happiness. For her and Sasuke to date? Never in my life. Naruto still hasn't forgiven this jerk for that tradition. Well, you've made up your mind, you bastard. Tricking her into getting into her pants. There's no Kagaya on him. Shaking her head, the girl got up from the table and moved to her room in deep thought. As soon as her fingers touched the door handle, Naruto suddenly felt a barely perceptible flash of chakra. The eyebrows immediately closed on the bridge of the nose. The morning began at the Konoha Collective Farm. Get out the pitchfork and expel all kinds of impudence. What are you doing here, Dadabayo? I went inside and stared at Sasuke in terrible displeasure. Smiling in all 28 teeth, he lost for somewhere when he got acquainted with the wall with his muzzle. Uchiha jumped over the windowsill and unceremoniously lowered his majestic ass on it. Naruto just exhaled at this. You can't explain to a person that no one is waiting for him here. I've already tried, it's useless. I came to congratulate you. Here, I brought you flowers. And, looking with devoted eyes at the silent girl, he pulled forward a bouquet. Beautiful, bright, tied with a white ribbon. As a sign that her innocence now belongs only to him. Just like her. Roses. Naruto went up to the guy and took her gift with some disdain. Her fingers weightlessly ran over the sharp thorns, her head shuddered with malicious laughter. And it didn't belong to a fox. And in honor of what? Encountering the cold in her beautiful eyes, Sasuke mentally sighed. I haven't accepted it yet. Well, nothing, he's a stubborn guy, the main thing is to act, as Shisui said. Happy Women's Day. A light eyebrow immediately lifted in insane irony. He's been gone for a long time. Well, he made a mock thoughtful face, crossing his arms over his chest. Happy Valentine's Day, then. Are you kidding me, Dadabayo? And she doused the guy with ki, showing that her patience was already running out. And if it ends with her, then it means that the apocalypse will soon happen in the world. For it is quite difficult to bring Naruto Uzumaki to a boil. But that's exactly what Sasuke has been doing for the last 6 months. And so he gave Kami such happiness on her little head. Come on, Naru. I just dropped by before the mission. I decided to see my girlfriend, and he smiled so charmingly and sensitively vulgarly that the blonde involuntarily shuddered. But not only out of anger and disgust. Now, quite unexpectedly, small parasites under the name of goosebumps began to rush through the body, dancing a very hot dance in the lower abdomen. And it even has a name. Desire. Her cheeks tingled, and Naruto awkwardly lowered her gaze. It's so unusual. She has a boyfriend. There is a parasite who looks at her with loving eyes. And she, a girl, you say, she stretched out in a low voice, making Sasuke wary. And then completely panic when Dobe's cute face was painted with a creepy grin. Well, then come here, I'll hug you goodbye. He could only squeeze out of himself when Naruto suddenly moved towards him with open arms. A suspicion crept inside that everything was not so simple, but Uchiha, eager to snuggle up to his Dobe, did not even catch the threat that flashed in his blue eyes. And a moment later he got in the face, prickly roses, taken aback by such tenderness. Sasuke deftly dodged his gift and, running to Doba behind his back, put his hands forward. His eyes widened with genuine shock, and his face stung from small cuts. And that's why no one told him that roses are weapons. And now get out of here, you dog. She growled furiously and rushed to her boyfriend on the wings of love. In order to eloquently show Tom where he can go with this gift. And Sasuke, realizing that he is very late for the mission, tactfully. I ran to the exit of the room. And at home to their dobe, respectively. Apparently she's in a mood to hell today. Maybe the menstruation has started. As soon as Uchiha flew out into the corridor, Naruto did not even hesitate. She ran after him, forcing the guy to demonstrate amazing running skills and dodging from Bijuu's little hands. And that's why only the fox gave her his power. Jumping over the railing, the guy landed gently on the first floor and rushed like a hurricane to the rescue exit. And the exit is closed by a key. Therefore, without thinking at all, Sasuke swept away the unfortunate door with his body, tearing it up by the roots. And he flew out into the street with her. And there were only heels sparkling, and take your broom. He, the parasite, came to the girl. With a growl, Naruto threw the flowers to the ground and put her hands on her hips with a terribly dissatisfied look. Her gaze dropped to the torn door, a heavy sigh escaped from her chest. And who will fix it, Dadabayo? And why you, Dobe? Eyelashes tremble, fingers press a corner of the blanket to his chest, and Naruto even forgets how to breathe. Inside, for some reason, it becomes insanely sad and bitter. And tears of despair begin to roll down my cheeks. There is so much pain in these words, so much hatred and contempt for life itself that there is no strength to restrain myself. She had been suppressing these emotions for too long. And today is the very day when you can be not a war heroine, not a savior of this world, but a simple girl. With their weaknesses and little dreams that, I love you. Disbelief freezes in her eyes, and her misunderstanding involuntarily breaks from her tongue. Do you love? Sasuke grins. Maybe it's even for the best that yes, he says confidently and looks at the one who shamelessly stole his sick heart. And she didn't even notice it. Stupid, her breathing quickens, her body shakes, she doesn't believe. Does not understand, does not want to take these words for the truth. But deep inside he grins with such sadness and despair that he just wants to die. Loves. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I wanted to, Dobe. You have always dreamed of being respected, appreciated and loved. And I fell in love. But as a man who can no longer do without your smile, laughter, yes, all of you. My whole life revolves around you. And now, he falls silent and lowers his head, and why is this all? She wouldn't understand his feelings. And she won't be able to love her as much as he does her. After all, in the heart of this sun, another lives. The body stiffens, and Sasuke looks up in surprise at the girl who stood in front of him. For some reason, her throat becomes unbearably dry, and an unbearable desire to hug her is born in her head. Hold her close and never let go again. But, he can't afford it, because she loves someone else, not his. He squints and starts shaking his head, driving away these senseless excuses. You lie down, and I'll go. He does not look at her, he cannot raise his eyes, and almost runs to the door in order to escape from the bitter realization, she doesn't need him. Wait, cold fingers close on his elbow and rather weakly, ask him not to leave. And Sasuke freezes. Stops breathing, does not even move, for fear of scaring off these pleasant goosebumps. The skin under her hand is burning, and her heart is already ready to jump out of her chest, just to hide from this tension. Why? Releases such bitterness from the tongue that Naruto hesitantly unclenches his fingers. She has no right to order him, she never had to. Stay with me. The head turns slightly to the side, and hope creeps into the eyes of the color of the night. Maybe all is not lost yet. Maybe he has a chance, just to stay. Take a deep breath, and Naruto takes a small step forward, putting his hands on the shoulders of a faithful friend. He was always there, constantly annoying, even angry. But he never pushed her away when she needed his help. Always grumpy and gloomy. But able to listen and support. Support. And a wall behind which nothing is scary, the thread with reality thinned as she snuggled up to him from behind. And then it broke completely, disappeared along with her hands, which chained him around the neck. The body shuddered from a small tremor, and Sasuke squinted at Naruto, who rested her chin on his shoulder. Let's try to be together. And it didn't take more than that for the guy to turn around to face the girl and look into her bottomless eyes with insane happiness. Trembling palms fell on reddened cheeks, after which Sasuke pressed his forehead to the forehead of his son. And he gave her such a joyful smile that Naruto no longer had any doubts. She made the right choice. My dobe, Sasuke always thought he could do absolutely everything. And even if he didn't know how, he was ready to learn it quickly. A new technique? Yes, no problem, Sharingan does its job perfectly. Tighten up the taijutsu? There are no difficulties at all. Itachi and Shisui have always willingly acted as his whipping toys. Learn the basics of cooking? Learn the language of a foreign country for a mission? Learn to waltz? And here he was the most. Well, you have to match the status of a handsome man and a war hero. So Uchiha did everything in order to be a versatile person, as Itachi constantly told him, but one side of this life somehow passed him by. And these are girls. More precisely, the relationship with them. And now, when Sasuke had this very girl, and even the most, he suddenly realized that he did not know at all how to behave with her. It was one thing when he was exclusively friends with Dobe. And it was completely different when she became his, a couple that he had to take care of. However, he immediately had a lot of problems with this. I don't understand what she wants. He ran his fingers through his hair and stared at the table with a completely lost look. Itachi, who was standing near the stove, only sighed sympathetically over his ototo. For in this matter he is not his assistant. To understand what Naruto needs is a completely impossible task. After all, there's a hell of a lot going on in her head. Even Kaguya from this solar whirlpool. That's why I hurried to the moon to continue to sit in silence. And then Naruto is able to qualitatively take out the brain with his pretentious and high-flown speeches. But the most interesting thing is that everyone unconditionally believes in this nonsense. Even them. Ask her out on a date. Sasuke raised his head slightly and looked at Shisui, who was sitting at the head of the table, in unrestrained skepticism. And ate the cooking of his beloved and best friend. Let's not break the child's psyche. Let others still think that he and Itachi are just best friends. And also very close. Well, before sleeping in the same bed. Yeah. Yes, she won't agree, he muttered sullenly, which immediately caused the guys to be very confused. Why? At the same time they asked, looking at each other. They would love to go, on a mission, of course. Why do they need this date, romance, kisses in the moonlight? Don't need anything at all, Sasuke sighed in response and replied in a low voice, because I won't offer it to her, and here Itachi even dropped the spoon in surprise. And Shisui choked on his tea in general, not believing his ears. Why? The elder Uchiha croaked dumbfounded, fully expressing the shock of his beloved best friend. After being silent for a minute, Sasuke looked up at the guy with a desperate look, full of such hopelessness that he didn't even need an explanation. The sight of a doomed virgin speaks for itself. I do not know what to do on this very date. Oh, my friend, the head of their little family slapped the boy on the shoulder and smiled kindly. Now Uncle Shisui will introduce you to the dating tour, and you're just such an expert. Itachi asked ironically, turning to the guys. After these words, Shisui proudly straightened his shoulders and said with an insanely charming smile, well, actually, as a teenager, I made half of Konoha happy with my company. And absolutely every girl was happy after a date with me. Therefore, here Shisui abruptly fell silent when a powerful release of monstrous ki suddenly occurred from Itachi. Looking at their hostess, the guys were instantly confused, and then completely swallowed when they stared at the thundercloud. Itachi's once beautiful and kind eyes have turned into two lifeless icicles. His face was distorted with insane anger and resentment. And the edge of the tabletop, which the genius of the clan clutched with his fingers, crunched pitifully and sagged under the weight of his anger. Exhaling noisily, Itachi slowly turned to his neighbors and stared at his lover in mad resentment. Ahem, sorry, best friend. So he goes on dates with women and dynamite me. Now you will sleep in the living room, and, proudly throwing up his nose, with a sweeping step, exuding waves of anger and irritation, rushed to his room. Away from that pathetic traitor. But, Shisui even got up from his chair when the love of his life swept past him. He also slapped his face with his tail, as if he had just committed the most monstrous offense during his existence. And don't you dare come near me, you hypocrite! Itachi glared menacingly at his best fucking friend and disappeared around the corner like a real cloud. As soon as Shoji was loudly knocked after the guy, Shisui ran his hand through his hair with a sigh and went to the stove. Here's a good example of why you need to be extremely careful with girls. He turned off the burner and, deeply inhaling the divine smell of meat with his nose, looked joylessly at Sasuke. One wrong word, and she will leave you not only without food, but also her body. After that, I hurried after my beloved friend, who is clearly in a mood to hell today. He started throwing tantrums. Did the autumn blues really take over? Stopping near the door, behind which the terribly dissatisfied hostess was sitting, Shisui took a deep breath and, briefly glancing at Sasuke who came up, stretched out in a soft voice, well, Bunny. That's not what I meant. You are my best and most economical get out. Itachi immediately muttered, which made Uchiha Sr. roll his eyes to the ceiling with a sigh, how tired he was with these women. But I thought that there would be less problems with the guy. Kitten, don't be angry. I only love you. I don't believe it, maybe he's on his period? Sasuke suggested, leaning his shoulder against the wall. And here Shisui had nothing to object to. For every day he becomes more and more convinced that Itachi needs to go on a mission urgently. Otherwise, household chores do not affect him in the most favorable way. If you want, I'll take you on a date. The door opened abruptly, and the frowning genius of the clan froze in the doorway. The lip is protruding forward. The eyes are glaring from under half-lowered eyelashes. And the face is distorted with such a childish resentment that Shisui immediately became stupefied. Well, how can you be offended by this beauty? I want kisses under the moon. Itachi sniffed and immediately found himself drawn to a man's chest, into which he pressed his face with great pleasure and joy. For Shisui is only his. Come here, you're my little one. The head of the family put his hand on the guy's head and gently moved his broad palm over it. And then, after making sure that his friend calmed down, he turned his tired gaze to Sasuke. I'll tell you later. The guy nodded briefly and immediately headed out of the house. There is nothing more for him to do here. He somehow doesn't really want to listen to the reconciliation of the lovebirds. I'll go to Doba. Somehow I'll sort out this date myself. Well, she won't kill me if I offer. A ragged cough, like a dog's wheezing, bounced off the tiled walls. Trembling fingers to white knuckles clung to the edges of the sink, the whiteness of which was mixed with scarlet streaks. Naruto spat again and looked with a shudder at the blood flowing down to the drain. A sheaf of icy goosebumps swept through her body, and the girl quickly turned on the water. A trembling hand hastily wiped the sink, after which Uzumaki looked up at her reflection. Sighed, too pale and tired, and even the fox's chakra has already stopped coping. Can you tell them? Don't leave me alone, Ku. I'll figure it out myself. She rather rudely besieged her tailed partner and immediately added, but a little softer and more hopeless. Besides, you yourself know that it's useless. Naru, are you there? Suddenly there was a loud knock on the door, which made the girl immediately put a smile on her face. No one needs to know. Yes, I'll be right out, Dadabayo, and, wiping her hands, she clicked the lock, opening the door. Flowers again? She drawled ironically, lowering her eyes to a bouquet of delicate daisies. Sasuke smiled awkwardly in response and ran his hand through his hair. No thorns now. You look too pale. Are you ill? With a touch of excitement, he looked at the face of his beloved, who only waved her hand at this. Then no. It's all good. I just haven't been out in the fresh air much lately, and she gave the worried guy her trademark smile from ear to ear, instantly washing away all his fears and concerns. Well, I can help you with this. He handed the bouquet to the girl and continued uncertainly, looking into her bottomless blue eyes. You heard that there's going to be a lantern festival in Tenzaku tonight. And I would like to, invite me? She helped him with a calm voice, to which Sasuke nervously blurted out, yes. And then he ran his finger under his nose in insane embarrassment. Oh, how difficult it is after all. It would be better if he once again opposed Kaguya than to build a relationship with his girlfriend. Well, how is our first? Naruto buried her nose in the soft petals, hiding the blush on her cheeks from the guy. A date? Exactly. Reacted violently, causing Uzumaki to laugh softly. Our first date. That's exactly what I wanted to offer you. But if you suddenly don't want to, or can't, then I'll understand and I'm happy to go on a date with you. She gently interrupted him, which made him immediately exhale with relief. It turned out, he didn't die from tension. Just don't worry so much. And then you won't live to see the first kiss. She winked and moved into their shared bedroom, in which Naruto had permanently settled after the Uchiha's confession. She didn't want to go back to the fourth house at all, because there was only cold and loneliness waiting for her there. And the small apartment of the best friend, and now the guy, attracted and beckoned with an inexplicable force. It was as if here was exactly what she had been missing all her life. And now, having taken root in this place, Naruto suddenly realized that it even became easier for her to breathe. And my head stopped splitting from a whole bunch of thoughts. And only a pressing feeling settled in her chest, preventing her from completely dissolving into the tenderness and kindness of her best friend, the guy. After seeing the girl off with his gaze, Sasuke threw his head back and threw his hands up with a silent cry. He did it. He did it. And today he will go on a date with Dobe. Elated and inspired by this thought, the guy jumped into the bathroom in order to make himself look divine. But just as he jumped to the sink, suddenly his gaze fell on a small spot of blood. Then another one, but already on the floor. And then the hand slowly pulled out a towel thrown behind the shower stall. From where? Looked at the white cloth, which was completely stained with blood, confused. Suddenly, a wave of icy goosebumps swept through my whole body, and a bad feeling arose in my heart. However, Sasuke quickly dismissed all these disturbing thoughts from himself, blaming everything on Naruto's fatigue. I'm just tired, it doesn't happen to anyone. Or hurt herself. Or, what women's affairs? Anything could happen, right? Uchiha sighed and threw the towel into the trash with some heaviness in his heart. He was just winding himself up. Yes, and she has a bijou, who is able to regenerate any of her wounds, nodded decisively to his reflection, after which he climbed into the shower with more confidence. Now all you need to think about is what he will do on a date. Fabrizio Paterlini, Rue de Trois Frères, you know, this is my first date. Proudly squaring his shoulders, Sasuke tightened his grip on his dobe's hand and walked with her through the main gate of the Tanzaku. The sun has already begun to sink below the horizon, painting the sky with the bright colors of sunset. Lanterns lit up all around, the rainbow light of which drove away the evening twilight. The streets were turning into a real rainbow every moment, absorbing all the colors of life. The benches around were full of flowers and attracted guests to the Tanzaku. There was a ripple of laughter all around, here and there were smiling people. Plunging into this lively and bright atmosphere, Naruto immediately began to look around. The little orphan's eyes darted from one flashlight to another, from one shop to another. And only in order not to miss anything, and to keep this solemn day in memory forever. First date. Mine too. Naruto immediately grinned and stared skeptically at her companion, who was already being stared at by young girls. And she was not deprived of male attention. That's just none of the others even dared to approach those who saved this world. War heroes. 2 chosen souls. And just 2 people who are able to both save this very world and destroy it. Yes, you're lying, Dadabayo. I'll never believe you didn't have a relationship. When, Dobe? Sasuke responded ironically, passing by benches with something edible and appetizing smelling. I was with you all the time. And for me there has always been only one girl. Do you want ice cream? Suddenly he offered, to which he immediately received an affirmative answer that I won't refuse, and, waiting for her companion to make an order, she stared questioningly at his Rinnegan, peeking out from under his long bangs. And when, what exactly? Phlegmatically responded, taking 2 horns with colorful balls. Naruto nodded gratefully and, taking her portion, continued their leisurely progress to the center of the town. Licking the topmost ball, the girl looked at the Uchiha again. When did you realize that you love? Sasuke twitched the corner of his mouth in response and replied in a calm voice, I was finally convinced of this in the war, when you climbed under all the blows. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. Hearing him, Naruto literally fell out of reality for a second, and then unexpectedly for the guy she laughed, attracting the eyes of others to her. The group of teenagers immediately stepped aside, so as not to interfere with the 2 heroes of the war to move forward unhindered. Yes, you are not as insensitive as I always thought. With a touch of irony, she said when she could calm a sudden burst of laughter. Well, don't belittle me at all, Sasuke muttered softly and pointedly began to look only at the ice cream, showing that he was offended by these words. Actually, I'm a hidden romantic, and out of desperation, he bit off a crunchy cone, which he was least concerned about right now. Like this whole festival, where he absolutely did not want to be. He would have been very happy to leave this noisy town and go somewhere with his dobe. Let it be a dense green forest or a high mountain, the top of which is hidden in the clouds, it doesn't matter. If only there was only silence and absolute peace. And then he will be able to confidently say that life is beautiful. And with a loved one, she will also become happy. What's what? Come on, repeat it. I need to hear it again. Uchiha snorted softly and turned his head to the side, trying to hide from her inquisitive gaze. Fuck off, Dobe. I won't tell you anything else. Slightly squinting her eyes, Naruto abruptly jumped in front of the guy, forcing him to stop. And with a huge smile, she looked into his frowning face. Are you offended, or what? Leaned forward a little, so Uchiha could see every capillary in her beautiful eyes. Yes, well, I'm sorry, topic, she stretched out in a fake guilty voice, which made Sasuke's look immediately become a little sly. Without saying anything, the guy offered his cheek to the girl and eloquently beat her with his finger. Naruto immediately protested picturesquely, but at the same time the smile did not come off her face, on the contrary, it became even wider and more radiant. As if she was ready for such a scenario and, understanding that their relationship should grow and develop. Like a flower that only Sasuke is taking care of right now. He envelopes him with his care. Loves and cherishes. And every morning he wakes up with the hope that this particular day will be the one, that today the flower will bloom and become a beautiful creature. Uchiha even squeezed his eyes shut with pleasure when soft lips touched his cheek. Every hair on his body stood on end, and it seemed that he was just going to fly to heaven. One weightless and completely chaste touch, and the guy was already ready to shout about his little victory. Extortionist. The face was suddenly distorted with confusion when, instead of the sweet warmth, the guy was doused with an unpleasant cold. The eyelids opened abruptly, and Sasuke stared after the fleeing girl in deep confusion. Dobe shook his head, wiping ice cream from his face with the sleeve of his raincoat, with which he was shamelessly smeared. And then, throwing his portion aside, he grinned like a fox and in an instant overtook his little sundae. I got it. Naruto froze abruptly when his velvety voice rolled by her ear. But then all the tension immediately dissolved into the soft and soothing warmth with which men's hands wrapped her. And now the girl was absolutely glad to be in the arms of this man. It was as if she had already accepted him as her life companion for a long time. And now what? She asked in a hoarse voice, to which a sly smile trembled at the corners of the man's lips. And literally in the same second, the couple found themselves on the highest building of the Tanzaku, from where a truly magnificent view of the evening city opened. Wonderful, Dadabayo. Naruto enthusiastically stretched out when she came to the very edge and saw a lot of flashlights scattered throughout the city. They were everywhere. Like multicolored fireflies waiting in the wings to soar into the sky. And to disperse the eternal gloom and darkness that has settled in human hearts. I wanted to ask everything. Sasuke stood on the girl's right hand and looked at the dark horizon in deep thought. How do you live with me? Why such questions? A quiet sigh, filled with heavy thoughts and fears, and the look of black eyes turned to that one. Just answer, Dobe. After thinking about this question for a while, Naruto looked at Uchiha and gave him an affectionate smile. Someday I will be able to love you, team. Now just give me a kiss. And it didn't take more than that for the hands to pull this angel to themselves and pull him into an insanely tender and grateful kiss. Small hands rested on strong shoulders, after which Naruto began to clumsily respond to the completely uncertain movements of the Uchiha. He kissed her so tenderly that gradually the ground under her feet disappeared somewhere, and the girl began to sink down, straight to the ground, which threatened to take away the connection with these lips, but Sasuke did not let her fall and deprive herself of a fleeting victory. He only pressed the girl closer to him and plunged headlong into an intoxicating, but such an innocent passion that grew between them. His hands squeezed the fragile body of his beloved until it crunched. Breathing had long ceased to saturate the brain with oxygen. And her heart was beating such a frantic rhythm that the girl involuntarily lowered her palm to this concentration of life. In order to feel with every cell of your body what this love feels like, after all, they are a beautiful couple. Itachi sobbed and put his head on his best friend's shoulder. Shursui could only smile and be happy for these two in his thoughts. After all, they deserve the best. And the family, in his opinion, is the most expensive gift that Naruto and Sasuke fully deserved. Especially a girl who has not known warmth and love since her birth. But maybe now she will get what she always dreamed of. Sakura-san, wait. Stopping at the crossroads of the hospital corridors, the girl sighed wearily and looked at the nurse who ran up to her. You asked me to tell you when Naruto Uzumaki's tests will be ready. All the fatigue was instantly washed away by inexplicable anxiety, and Haruno took the proffered folder with a shudder. The fingers literally froze for a moment, and then opened the received report on the blood test data. Her eyes quickly ran over the frightening numbers, after which Haruno rechecked everything several more times. And when a persistent understanding settled in her head that there could be no mistake, Sakura thanked the nurse for her help and almost ran into her office. The click of the lock, after which the legs finally stopped holding her. The body sank heavily to the floor, knees pulled up to the chest. And only after that, the girl allowed her emotions to break out. A muffled sob flew away from the cold walls, which gradually turned into a real sob. Hot tears rained down on her friend's results, and unrestrained and all-consuming despair froze in the eyes of the color of spring. "Why you, Naru? Why?" Itachi flew across the clearing and hit a steep cliff with a limp doll, which met him with a painful groan. And the thought that he had a big hit, Sharingan lit up in his eyes again, and the guy jumped away from a new attack that would definitely smear him into a cake. Gently landing at a safe distance, Uchiha cautiously looked at the enraged Jinchuriki and sighed heavily. "Naruto, stop," and immediately fell silent when several burning stones flew at him. Dodging the deadly technique, Itachi already wanted to get away from Uzumaki, just not to engage her in battle. But as soon as he lifted his leg for a forced escape, Naruto jumped up to him. A lot of pause from the chakra escaped from her body, and literally in a moment the wounded and beaten Uchiha was captured by an angry girl. "I told you not to climb." And with all her might she slammed the guy into the ground, forming a deep funnel under him. Something cracked dangerously in his chest, after which trickles of blood flowed down his chin. "And Naruto, you," Itachi croaked in a strangled voice and was immediately thrown into the air. There were forces to fight, and he could stop their Sunny, he could suppress her chakra. But, for some reason I didn't do it. As if he was afraid that by such actions her trust in him and in all the remaining Uchiha would be undermined. And Itachi didn't want that at all. The girl was about to rush to her opponent, but suddenly felt a sharp pain in her chest. The yellow cover of the fox suddenly disappeared, and her legs completely stopped holding her. Collapsing on her knees to the ground, Naruto sank her palms into the soft earth, after which she burst into such a monstrous, wheezing cough that the man's heart shrank in fright. Itachi regrouped in the air and landed near Uzumaki at the same moment. Falling to one knee, the guy put his hand on her shoulder and began to watch with a shudder the blood flowing down the woman's lips. "Son, what's wrong with you?" he whispered cautiously, causing trembling fingers to squeeze clods of earth with anger. And that's what she was just thinking when she decided to ask Itachi to go on a mission with her. Why did I call Sasuke's brother at all, if I knew that this would definitely happen? It always happens when she overstresses her chakra canals and uses the Biju chakra. And every month this influence becomes more pernicious and painful. OTS, get off, Databayo. And she looked up at Uchiha with an animal look filled with anger. It's nobody's business." The man's eyebrows immediately closed on the bridge of his nose, and a mad rage flashed in his black eyes. "Nobody, you say?" he blurted out nervously, digging his fingers into the woman's shoulder to the point of pain. "Is it okay that we are your family? Doesn't that mean anything to you? So, the son?" And in a fit, he grabbed her bloody chin with 2 fingers. "If you don't tell me right now, I'll knock you out and forcibly drag you to the hospital." Smiling mirthlessly, Naruto closed her eyes and whispered with insane sadness. "It started right after the victory over Kaguya. Until the ribbon breaks, use me up." Sasuke was lying on the bed and mindlessly staring at the ceiling when the long-awaited voices suddenly came from the hallway. He breathed out a sigh of relief, then jumped to the floor and walked briskly out of the bedroom. But when he reached the doorway, Uchiha froze abruptly, hearing snatches of a rather strange dialogue. "Just don't tell him that, but, Itachi, please. I don't want anyone to know." There was a heavy sigh, after which Sasuke quietly looked out into the corridor. An uncomprehending glance fell on Itachi, who was hugging Naruto and whispering softly to her about something. The Sharingan immediately burned in his eye, but by this time Aniki had already finished. He pulled away from the girl and gently kissed her on the forehead. And then, without saying anything else, he waved his hand and left the apartment. "I also want to see my beloved. To hug and silently whisper how happy he is that everything is fine with him, unlike their son, and what are you hiding there? Topic. Naruto put her hands on her hips and stared at her conspirator boyfriend with mock condemnation. Realizing that he could not be a spy, Sasuke came around the corner and slowly moved towards Uzumaki. But with every step, the puppy's joy that she was back grew stronger in her chest. And it became so difficult to keep a mask of frown that in the end he just smiled. Putting aside all his suspicions and bad thoughts, Naru, he whispered happily as he pulled the girl to him and wrapped her in a bear hug. The bones creaked pitifully, and the woman's face swam with a crimson blush. However, the girl did not even say a word to him to let her go or hug her easier. She just endured and put out the emotions rushing out in herself with all her might. You can't cry and be sad, this person should only see her smile. And the joy of having such a wonderful boyfriend. Drawing the tip of his nose along the curve of his neck, Sasuke inhaled deeply the fragrance of his dobe and lightly kissed her on the cheek. You took a long time, and slightly pulled away in order to admire what belongs only to him. Sky-colored eyes, the most beautiful smile on earth. And just an angel who was given to him by fate itself. Nothing happened. The girl rolled her eyes in response and said with a sigh, the daimyo did not want to let me go. Imagine, he asked me to marry one of his sons, and, continuing to tell, she headed towards the bedroom, where a soft and insanely desirable crib awaits her. And then Itachi and I dropped by to visit Auric, he asked, and Sasuke caught up with Uzumaki in an instant and stared at his woman with blazing eyes. Tomo in Mange-kai dangerously twisted, and Rinnegan even flamed up more than ever. It was as if he had absorbed all the anger and hatred of the whole world. What did he want? He muttered through his teeth, barely restraining himself from killing one fat ass. Well, they decided to offer something like Naruto. Those bitches, yes, you don't fuss. Topic, she replied in a calm voice and went to the bed. Itachi has arranged such a thing there that the daimyo will not want to see anyone from your clan for a long time. So you don't have to worry, a meeting with the head of fire is booked for you for the next 10 years. Well, that's good, he snorted contemptuously under his breath, then involuntarily swallowed when the girl threw off her cloak. The dark red cloth slid smoothly over her body and fell noiselessly at the feet of a real goddess. The sandals flew off unconditionally to the side, and Naruto flopped helplessly into the arms of a soft feather bed. How she dreamed of finding herself in this particular crib. As soon as the girl lay down on her stomach, Uchiha did not stand for long in thought. And then he carefully crawled to his beloved, sitting on top of her with terrible uncertainty. Feeling the weight of his body on her, Naruto imperceptibly tensed and involuntarily pinched the soft blanket with her fingers. What are you doing? Topic. She asked timidly and at the same moment jerked when cold fingers penetrated her t-shirt, the corners of his lips twitched, and Sasuke slowly sank onto Uzumaki's back, spreading a pleasant warmth in a velvety whisper in the lower abdomen. I want to help you relax. Will you let me? And weightlessly slid the pads of his fingers along the curves of a woman's waist. The room suddenly became hot, and an unusual feeling of alienation seized the whole body. It was as if she was now placed in a kind of vacuum, leaving only the ability to feel it. Come on, Dadabayo. Having received her uncertain and terribly sweet consent, Sasuke carefully pulled off the girl's t-shirt, after which he touched the clasp of the bra with special lust. Uzumaki closed her eyes tightly and tensed again when the tight elastic band stopped pulling her back. And instead, cold palms fell on the shoulder blades. It tickles, involuntarily giggled and squirmed under the guy, forcing him to grin. It will be nice now, and in confirmation of his words, he held his hands up to his shoulders, starting to massage them with his strong fingers. A blissful purring suddenly burst out of the woman's chest, which gradually began to flow into moans of insane bliss. What Naruto was talking about while Uchiha was giving her a massage, she will not remember. As well as about what he asked her to do later, when he gave her unforgettable sensations with just his hands. Uzumaki simply complied with his request, without even thinking about the consequences. She felt so good that the girl returned to reality only at a moment of special and awkward bliss. The eyelids opened abruptly, and Naruto looked confusedly at the palms that fell on her chest. "Sasuke?" On the exhale, she croaked, to which the guy only grinned mysteriously. And he passed hard P's between his fingers, slightly digging his fingers into the supple flesh. His caress was so sweet and tender that blissful half-moans and half-sobs involuntarily flowed from his plump lips. And silent please to continue, her eyes closed again, and Naruto began to burn in this unexpected caress, involuntarily fidgeting under the guy and rubbing against his arousal. And when it became really hard to bear this painful torture, Sasuke sat back a little and bent down to his heaving chest. The misty gaze turned to the face of his beloved, and the guy slowly wrapped his lips around the pink nipple. The vertebrae immediately cracked, bending in the back, after which Naruto ran her fingers through her Uchiha's hair. Topic. And it didn't take more than that for him to start acting with more determination and the thought that she didn't mind this intimacy at all. The hot tongue circled the halo of the breast and licked the nipple with special trepidation. And then he laid a wet path to his stomach, where he stopped for just a moment. "Just to look at your son. And make sure she's okay." Fingers penetrated under the belt of short shorts and gently pulled them down to the ankles, from where they unconditionally flew somewhere to the window. As soon as the most unnecessary part of the wardrobe was finished, the eyes burning with desire dropped to the polka-dot panties, and a gentle smile flew from his lips. "And you haven't grown up at all, Dobe," he thought, and, picking up the elastic bands of underwear, suddenly stopped it. "Can I?" he croaked in an awkward voice when he met her bottomless eyes. A warm smile immediately touched the woman's lips, and Naruto slowly sat down on the bed, approaching her confused boyfriend. "If you had asked me about it when you took your virginity, then I would have sent you to Kaguya." And now, and under the dumbfounded gaze of black eyes, she freed herself from the last item of clothing. For some reason, the cheeks of both were covered with a scarlet blush, and the couple awkwardly smiled at each other, fully understanding what kind of virgins they were after all. "And now what, Dadabayo?" Moving away from the first shock, Sasuke quickly shook his head and stood up on his knees with a determined look. "Lie down, Dobe." He closed his fingers on her chin and tilted his head back with an imperious movement. And then, bending down to the terribly red face, he penetrated her half-open mouth with a hot whisper, "I will make you feel good." Swallowing nervously, the girl slowly sank onto her elbows, then lay down again on the soft blanket, directing an awkward look at the guy. Sasuke, hiding all his embarrassment and awkwardness behind the mask of a tough guy, squeezed between the legs of his beloved and, swallowing, looked at her maiden rose. One glance, and an unrestrained wave of desire and excitement swept through the whole body. There was a pleasant pull in his pants, a spark of lust shone in his eyes, scorching every cell of his tense body. And in order to ignite this spark into a real fire, in order to bring that very moment of intimacy closer, Uchiha descended to the female womb, weightlessly touching the groin area with his lips. Sensing how he was slowly moving towards the source of her desire, Naruto blushed even more. And I tried to shift my hips so as not to feel so awkward. But the man's hands, which fell on the inside of her slender legs, made it clear that there was no turning back. She had let herself get so close to her, and he wasn't going to wait any longer. Naruto sobbed pitifully when a hot tongue touched her swollen clitoris. The whole body tensed, and the girl bit her lower lip painfully, not knowing why. Why restrain yourself when you are caressed by a loving person? Why be ashamed of your nakedness when he idolizes you and exalts you? Why all this awkwardness when there's not much time left? "Sasuke," she croaked in a strangled voice and threw her head back, covering her burning eyes. "And letting the guy do whatever he wants with her. She is ready for any intimacy, as long as this person feels good." Catching the request in her voice, Uchiha cast a fleeting glance at the contorted face with pleasure, after which he sucked in the swollen clitoris with his lips. A sweet moan immediately flew from the woman's lips, and Sasuke began to act a little more confidently and decisively. He ran his tongue over the already wet labia and again caressed the most sensitive place of his son. And then, having licked all the secretions oozing from the hot depths, he penetrated them with the thought that soon he would fill them with his unrestrained love and devotion. And he will do everything so that Dobe will never be able to leave him. Oh, Bijuva eggs, Naruto arched as Sasuke began to lick her vagina, trying to push inside with his tongue. And if she endured this torture with great consciousness and understanding, then the girl finally lost her mind. His fingers squeezed his jet-black hair until it hurt, and the first cry of pleasure escaped from his chest. Grinning contentedly, the guy penetrated his beloved with 2 fingers, after which he began to move steadily in this insanely wet and hot womb. The tongue and lips did not cease to torment the clitoris, and the hand accelerated its caress every moment. If only the adored son screamed. If only it glowed with happiness and the thought that she had made the right choice. And so, when the female body tensed from the approaching wave of orgasm, and the pressure on the head began to grow relentlessly, Sasuke began to act deeper and even a little more aggressive. Internal muscles were contracting intensely around his fingers. And the tongue licked even more of the sweet juice flowing from the cherished depths. His nose was deeply inhaling the intoxicating fragrance, from which he was ready to lose his head. Or finally go into nirvana with his beloved, who gave herself to him in full power. Naruto didn't hold back. "I didn't build a quiet and proper girl," she screamed loud and long. "And it was also so exciting that it became very tight and hot in my pants." Male flesh has long been languishing from the desire and impatience to swap places with fingers. And the guy's brain fully shared these desires of the body, eager to merge with the girl into one. He was waiting for the moment when his beloved would reach her boiling point. And when that moment came, Uchiha could not restrain the blissful purring and the thought that now he would make Naruto his forever. Shuddering in unbearably sweet convulsions, the girl arched and shouted about how good she was. Her toes curled in a frenzied spasm, and every cell of her body was covered with a deafening wave of bliss. Consciousness flowed away after insanely pleasant sensations, after which a certain relief and lightness came. Lips stretched in a blissful smile, and hands pulled the guy to himself, in order to reward him for such a nice gift. Sinking down on the fragile body of his son, Sasuke brushed her hair off her face and was immediately pulled into a deep and grateful kiss. Naruto involuntarily mumbled into his lips when an unusual taste appeared in his mouth. And then, with a note of interest, she looked into the eyes burning with desire. "I also want to. I want to try, Dadabayo," she whispered awkwardly, which made Uchiha immediately feel a powerful surge of embarrassment. So that someone, besides his hand, would please his dignity. "Yes, with pleasure," mentally shouted, and at the same second swapped places with the girl. Palms covered her buttocks, and the Uchiha's face sparkled with such cunning that Naruto instantly regretted that she had blurted out such a thing at all. "And that's who was pulling her tongue, only you. Don't laugh too much." I. The girl stopped abruptly when a hot palm landed on her cheek. "I'll help you, Dobe," and he smiled, showing that she had nothing to fear. He would guide her. And then they will comprehend this side of life together, like a guy and a girl. And then, as husband and wife, nodding timidly, Uzumaki picked up the edge of the t-shirt under Kurama's terrible guffaw and began to nervously lift it up. And as she exposed her boyfriend, his relief body opened up to her eyes. Perfect abs cubes, a pumped-up chest dotted with small scars, and then his smug pug peeking out from under the black fabric. "Don't smile, team. I'll close my eyes now," and she lowered her gaze to the point of insanity, so as not to see the obscene smile playing on his lips. Sasuke, in response, only put his palms forward in a conciliatory manner, after which he closed his eyes and put one hand under his head. "They say, I won't embarrass you anymore." But with the second hand he slowly led along the curves of the female waist, slowly getting closer to the lush breasts. And while Naruto did not crawl away from him at all, the guy did not fail to touch this charm, which beckoned him to himself. After all this belongs only to him. And he expects to enjoy every inch of his goddess's body. That's just first relieve the tension with the help of her sweet mouth, and then it will be possible to move to a new level of their relationship. Naru-chan, why don't you, oh, you rabbits, the girl screamed in surprise and disappeared from the room like a bullet when she noticed Shisui in the wide-open window. As soon as the loud banging of the door was heard, Sasuke patiently exhaled and brushed his bangs from his left eye. Uchiha Sr. immediately swallowed nervously, meeting Rinnegan's gaze. I'll probably come back later. He grinned nervously and, raggedly running his hand through his hair, galloped back to the street. And the unsatisfied guy jumped out of bed with a bullet and without much thought rushed after this jerk. To explain once for a lifetime that you can't break into this apartment through a window, Itachi shook his head disapprovingly when Sakura started treating Shisui. Cuts, bruises, broken ribs and a dislocated arm are just a small part of what Sasuke did to him when he caught up. How many times have I told you not to get involved with young people? The older Uchiha hissed in a strangled voice and gratefully looked at Haruno, who set his arm. Yes, I wanted to see Naru. You've been gone a whole week. And I really missed her. And you didn't miss me, then? An evil light suddenly flashed in Itachi's eyes, which made Sakura grin involuntarily, and Shisui beat his head against the wall in his thoughts. It's starting again, my dear, my beautiful, fluffy and black cat, the most beloved hostess in the whole world. Be kind, don't fuck my brain right now, otherwise my head is already bursting, he muttered discontentedly, asking his friend to stop with an insanely beaten look. Sasuke was enough for him. It was not enough to listen to his hysterical brother. Hearing him, Itachi let out an exasperated sigh and stared at his light in this dark world with a touch of resentment. Although now it is better to say, a traitor, for whom women are again more important than a best friend. Oh, so that means. And he turned his nose up, striding out of the office with a long stride, realizing that this hysterical woman was leaving, and with obviously bad consequences for him. Shisui abruptly jumped up from the couch, forcing Sakura to take a step back. Itachi, wait, why? The guy stopped in the doorway and stared at the older Uchiha with an insanely indignant look. You didn't ask me for a brain. So I won't. And I won't take another place either. So you can go to your whores, traitor. He snorted and shot out into the corridor, leaving not only Shisui in the Ahu out, but also Sakura, who had heard about the relationship of these two. I just didn't even think that I would witness their quarrel. I could only squeeze out of myself, directing a puzzled look at the remaining guy. Don't even ask, a complicated relationship, and flopped back on the couch in an attempt to figure out what he should do now. How to get forgiveness from, but what is forgiveness for? He blinked in confusion, looking into the void in front of him, which Haruno was now filling. What kind of fly bit Itachi? Why is he so angry? Comment to Chapter 4. Ways to relax from Sasuke. Aha, the Oblamingo bird has arrived. Did you think that they would sleep together or Naru would make him feel good? But no, everything is ahead. Therefore, we read and wait for the next Eucharost from the author. Although what kind of Eucharost, another PvP. The next 2 chapters will be NTS Shinimai. But then we'll slowly start moving towards the finale and I listened to my music here, thought about being, and I came up with an idea to continue this work. Allah the second part, therefore, I want to find out, do I need to do it or not? The idea is really cool, well, for me. But over time, I have a terrible trouble. And I want to know your opinion in order to understand which projects to embark on in the future. Because the second part for this FF will definitely be maxi. I don't promise that it will come out by summer. But it will come out if you want. I end short. I am waiting for your decision. Sitting at the kitchen table, Naruto shook her head disapprovingly and brought a cotton wool to her broken knuckles. And it was necessary to beat him, definitely, Sasuke snorted irritably and looked down at his hand, with which he beat up one arrogant and annoying relative thoroughly. If he had his way, he would have killed him altogether. For at such a moment he showed up. Sasuke has already mentally tuned into a pleasant pastime with Dobe. And then such a bummer happened. Here's a meeting, I'll castrate the freak. And I'll also break my legs too, and he winced significantly when the girl pressed too hard on the wound. Does it hurt, Dadabayo? She looked guiltily at the guy from under half-lowered eyelashes, to which he immediately made a plaintive pug. Yeah, of course, it really hurts. We went to war with a broken arm, a broken spleen and a bunch of wounds from which an ordinary person would have died long ago. But not him. It's unpleasant, he muttered softly, which immediately sparked a sly twinkle in his blue eyes. And if so? And, raising his hand to her lips, she lightly kissed his broken knuckle. Uchiha immediately pressed his lips into a thin line and stared at his girl with a mixture of surprise and joy. It still tingles, Naruto grinned in response and unexpectedly for the guy leaned towards him. Pleasant goosebumps spread over his face, and Uchiha leaned forward slightly, scorching the inviting lips with heavy breathing. She swallowed loudly and tentatively ran her tongue over his lower lip, pulling an interested grunt from the male chest. Smiling slyly, the guy pulled his beloved to his lap and immediately lowered his broken hands on her buttocks. Yes, Naruto-san, you should have gone to Irianini. I'd be constantly wringing my hands, the girl gasped into his lips when Sasuke began to gently bite his fingers into the supple flesh. Her mouth instantly became very dry, and Uzumaki involuntarily rubbed against her subject's body. The wet crotch slid over the protruding bump, which already made Uchiha feel a powerful surge of excitement. I can become your personal doctor, Sasuke-san, she croaked in a hoarse voice, finally knocking down all the locks to unrestrained passion. A moment dissolved in his bottomless eyes, and the girl involuntarily gasped, feeling the kitchen table with her ass. The men's t-shirt was hurriedly torn from the body, after which Sasuke spread his legs wide apart. Hands fell on her hips, and the girl was pressed close to the tense body, from which the heat of passion no longer emanated, but a real fire. Even through her clothes, she could feel the Uchiha burning in her own desire. How it melts from every touch to her body, dissolving both in this intoxicating whirlpool of feelings and emotions. He was suffocating, could not get enough of the air, soaked through with the sweet aroma of his girl. And with every touch of her beauty, consciousness was irrevocably dissolved in one single desire, to make this goddess his own. Naruto even stopped breathing when Team bent down to her neck and left a light kiss on her. The head fell back, and a trembling hand buried itself in the coarse hair, lightly pressing on the back of the head. And then the body seemed to have a life of its own, the legs shackled the guy around his pumped-up torso, the wet crotch, covered with a thin fabric of panties, began to move jerkily along the male groin, staining it with shiny secretions. And hoarse requests to give herself to her burst from her lips. Once she knew what it was like to be with a man, with a friend, a guy who loves her more than life. And now Naruto craves this sweet warmth. As soon as Sasuke heard the cherished words, he abruptly pulled away from the thin collarbone and stared with bleary eyes at Uzumaki's blissful face. His chest was heaving rapidly and raggedly, and his skin was already beginning to shine in the light of the bright sun that peeked through a small window. Uchiha picked up his own t-shirt and began to quickly pull off this damn fabric from his beloved Dobe. Naruto only obediently stretched her arms up, very weakly helping him undress himself. Now she was far away from here in thoughts of the imminent bliss that this man would give her. And from this she did not even catch the moment when the guy tore her wet panties. When he threw it on the table in order to take his own. And when he lowered his pants, releasing the already hard flesh, Naruto returned to reality only when the long-awaited sensations did not come. Her eyes opened slightly, and the girl immediately noticed how Sasuke was pulling on a t-shirt. The penis disappeared into his pants again, and all the desire in his eyes was abruptly washed away by insane anger and even rage. "What are you? Get dressed, dobe," he said rather coldly and threw her a t-shirt so that she would hide her nakedness. Frowning in puzzlement, Uzumaki sat down on the table and was about to get dressed, when suddenly a loud knock on the door came from the hallway. And according to the chakra that was outside, Naruto immediately realized that there would be one more corpse in the morgue today. Hastily pulling on a t-shirt, the girl ran around the guy, slightly puzzling him, opened the front door and without any doubt hit the newcomer in the nose. Shisui flew to the next wall, but he didn't even have time to ask anything. And immediately got a fist in the gut, after which a quiet crunch of ribs was heard. "We will have to go to Sakura again. Sons, yes, you're already coming, Dadabayo." And, grabbing the guy by the hair, she slammed his forehead against the wall with all her might. A frightened woman immediately looked out of the neighboring apartment, who quickly disappeared back. "Because I don't really want to mess with war heroes. Especially if they are out of sorts." Sasuke opened his mouth dumbfounded when his beloved began to beat Shisui. But then he grinned maliciously, remembering that this bastard had interrupted them again. "And now the question is, did you show up?" Kicking the guy in the barrel for the last time, the girl snorted contemptuously and, proudly straightening her shoulders, walked back to the apartment. Flashing her bare ass. As soon as the finished Jinchuriki left, Shisui got up from the floor and leaned his back against the wall with an insanely pitiful look. "Well, what did I do wrong again?" And he frowned resentfully, fixing his gaze on Sasuke. Is it his imagination, or is the ghost about to cry? It doesn't matter. He waved his hand and with a sigh leaned his shoulder against the door jamb, dreaming of a failed lemon in his thoughts. And happiness was so close. He had already felt the heat of her depths. What happened?" After these words, Shisui lowered his head, covering it with his hands, and answered in a sad voice, "Itachi kicked me out. And now I have nowhere to go." Sasuke sharply raised an eyebrow and stared at this idiot in deep incomprehension. "And we are here, it's all because of you." He jumped up nervously, glaring at the guy with an angry look. Rinnegan flashed dangerously, which made Shisui immediately calm down. "And he also said that he doesn't want to see me anymore." And he cried picturesquely over his difficult life with a hysterical woman. Why did he fall in love with this particular person? What kind of fly bit Itachi? I dug into one single phrase, and that's it: pack your things and get out. Sighing heavily, Sasuke pulled away from the jam and ran his hand through his hair. He can't banish this miracle, the family, after all. "Come in, Goriushka. Let's see what can be done with your relationship, John Hopkins." Abandoned window. Itachi stopped in front of the entrance to the village of Hot Springs and exhaled softly. And squinted at his companion, who was silent almost the whole way. And she smiled mysteriously. He would even say suspicious. "It's like this fox is up to something. Or is that how it is?" Rolling her eyes, Naruto grabbed the guy by the hand and forcibly dragged him towards the springs. "Rest body and soul, Dadabayo. I'm tired." So, Uchiha abruptly became serious, after which he appeared in front of the girl in the blink of an eye. An anxious glance slid over her face, but did not notice anything suspicious. Fortunately. "Are you in pain? Are you dizzy?" Or, "I'm fine," she interrupted him in a soft voice, putting her hand on his shoulder. "It's just that the road from Kumo wasn't as easy for me as it used to be. Yes, and this gang of Nukanons. So let's go relax a little," and, grabbing the guy by the elbow, she dragged him to the main treasure of this village with less resistance. As soon as they reached the cherished goal, Itachi immediately took over the entire initiative. After all, he is a man. Having paid for visiting the springs, the couple agreed on what time they were meeting, after which Uchiha moved towards the men's locker room. Along the way, he didn't stop thinking about what Naruto had told him. This news was a real blow to him. Shock. And just a tragedy, from which he hastened to shut himself off. In this world, nothing is impossible, you just need to try and not lose heart. Which he did, offering Naruto his help, but how much time do we have until the moment when nothing can be fixed? He thought, pushing the shoji away, and then he hurried to close them when he stared at one insolent muzzle. I see, he muttered in a monotonous voice, then rushed to the exit from this trap. And how did he not immediately guess that this bastard would turn to the children for help? Well, there is no conscience at all, Itachi. Wait, Shisui shot out into the corridor and caught up with his best friend, whom he immediately grabbed by the shoulders. However, Itachi simply threw off his hands and, without turning around, continued his interrupted path. To get as far away as possible from the idea that he will not be able to smile, rejoice, to be happy, hiding the secret of another person. Hiding the truth from your beloved Ototo, who will then be hurt the most. Yes, stop you. Sighing, Itachi obediently stopped and looked with some sadness at his happiness, which stood a step away from him. The best friend is the love of my life. And a support that helps him cope with all difficulties. But just the thought that she might disappear makes Itachi afraid, because Shisui has become everything to him. The very life without which he would simply die, just like Sasuke, when his world will no longer be illuminated by the little sun. Let's talk. Please, and looked into his eyes with such hope and entreaty that Itachi could not refuse. He only lowered his gaze to the floor, not having the strength to look into the gloomy and dark future. I'm not mad at you, Shisui, he began in a calm voice, which made Uchiha Sr. immediately confused. It's just that I suddenly realized that our relationship has no future. His eyes widen from deep shock, and Shisui leans forward sharply, feeling a sticky feeling of emptiness begin to spread inside. Why, what are you saying? He grins nervously, but then immediately feels something break inside. My heart is squeezed with insane pain, and deep despair freezes in my eyes when Itachi's face freezes in a mask of cold. I shouldn't have pushed you with my feelings. It looked selfish on my part. Therefore, I'm sorry for such unworthy behavior. And, he takes a step back and looks at Shisui point blank. There is no doubt in his eyes, he is sure. He has to do it. But my heart starts screaming, beating against my chest, begging me not to do it. It will perish in anguish, it will crumble into loneliness, to which he condemns himself. But, it's necessary. Because then it will hurt more to let go. And it hurts more, to lose that goodbye, and leaving him alone. Leaving me alone with shock and misunderstanding. Why? What did he do wrong? Why is Itachi so cruel to him? They love each other. Or not anymore. Fierce anger rises from the depths, hatred for this world fills his eyes, and Shisui just goes berserk. In an instant, he catches up with Itachi and slams him into the wall with all his might. The boards are cracking, visitors are in a hurry to get away from this monstrous aura. And Shisui only looks at him. He looks coldly, with a touch of disgust and resentment, and slowly bites his fingers into the yielding flesh. The air is running out, and Itachi involuntarily closes his eyes. Maybe it would be better this way? After all, what is the point of living in a world that a girl who has become a light for many people will soon leave? Why? Shisui growls, and a mirthless grin breaks from his lips. Because I don't want you to suffer, freezes in a constricted throat, from which only wheezes and silent requests do not get angry at him come out. It's better this way. For everyone. What are you doing, Dadabayo? An icy gaze is directed to the side, and Shisui sees Naruto. There was fear on her face. And there is such a lack of understanding in the eyes that the fingers slowly begin to unclench. Something he really overreacted. Nothing. He walks away and looks with immense resentment at Itachi, who powerlessly slides to the floor. Teeth clench, cheekbones cramp from unbearable tension, and a lump of unbidden tears freezes in my throat. But only empty words come out of his lips. I deserve at least an explanation. A heavy sigh escapes from his chest, and Shisui just leaves. Leaves behind all his hopes and dreams. Leaves the meaning of life, which was so cruelly taken away from him. But why? What did he do to deserve such a cold attitude? It's better this way. Itachi is quietly wheezing, trying to calm his broken heart. But somehow it doesn't work out. A single tear rolls out of the corner of his eyes. For some reason I want to cry. There are too many emotions, and there are no more forces to restrain them. What are you doing? There was a genuine shock in her blue eyes when Naruto noticed Itachi's condition. Completely unaware of what had just happened, she squatted down in front of him and couldn't even find anything to say. She just wrapped her fingers around his palms and squeezed them tightly, showing that she was next to him. Naru, can I cry? Wow. The nine-tailed man could only growl, not believing what he heard. To Uchiha, and cry? Yes, the second coming of Kaguya is clearly planned in the world, of course, she responded softly and with wide-open arms met the confused man buried in her fragile shoulder. As soon as his arms wrapped around this little son, as soon as he hid his face from the outside world, Itachi squeezed his eyes shut and sobbed softly. And why is life so unfair? He thought bleakly, after which emotions irrevocably overwhelmed him. Shisui fell out of the bar and with an empty gaze smeared the starry sky, the blackness of which immediately reminded him of his eyes. Growling, the guy hit himself in the face with all his might, demanding in his thoughts to forget this bastard. Now he doesn't even have the right to think about Itachi. He treated him like a dog. Unnecessary and useless to anyone. Well, that's right, I'm not so good for our genius, he snorted angrily and moved unsteadily along an empty street. The residents had long since dispersed to their homes, and only he did not know where to go now. To Konoha? No, Shisui will not be able to be near the mistake of his naivety and credulity. Therefore, it remains, only to take a long-term mission. Suddenly, the look of drunken eyes fell on a neighboring institution, from which a cheerful and very familiar company came out. The chakra quickly flowed through the body, after which the lips spread out in a crooked grin. And here is my passion for this night, and he strode towards the shinobi from Konoha. Dino, I didn't expect to see you here. Sasuke has heard that representatives of the Uchiha clan often choose a mate for life. But in most cases, such alliances were built solely on mutual understanding. And sometimes coercion. There was practically no love as such in them. Over time, maybe something was born. However, there was no talk of any strong feelings, only Sasuke's case was different. He loved Naruto. Adored her to the point of unbearable trembling. Idolized as something completely extraterrestrial and unreal. And he was also jealous of almost every pillar. Uchiha never thought that he would lose control because of ordinary jealousy. But today is exactly the day. Another gust of dry wind blew up clouds of sand, painting the haze of the desert with the glare of the scorching sun. The skin was silvered with hot sweat, sand dust was visible in the hair, which crunched unpleasantly on the teeth. Sasuke was angry, furious. Mangekyo Sharingan was burning in his eyes, and God's own Dojutsu was peeking through his bangs. The body was bound by purple armor, ready to grow into a full-fledged warrior at any moment. And only in order to punish all sorts of impudence. Don't. You know. A cold gaze darted to Uzumaki, who suddenly appeared between him and the future corpse. Protects him, how pathetic it looks. Go away, Naruto, his voice is as harsh as ever. And the gloomy aura, saturated with fierce hatred, says only that all the guilty will be punished in the most painful and cruel way. This is a matter of honor. Isn't that right, Kazekage? 2 weeks before that, Naruto jumped out of the hotel window and looked around. The village is still sleeping. The water surface of the springs was colored with bright orange tones of dawn. The first rudiments of a new day began to seep from the horizon. A peaceful silence spread through the empty streets and alleys along which residential buildings were located. And only the quiet crunch of gravel under the sole disturbed this heavenly peace, becoming a real outlet for a tired soul. She loved such moments of silence. Recently she did. After the war, or maybe before, Naruto doesn't know herself anymore. And she's not trying, she just doesn't want to dig into the past, which has taken away too many people dear to her. Jiraiya, father, mother, friends, all of them died, in fact, for nothing, and this hurts the most. Every day a feeling of hopelessness and deep despondency grows inside. And the strength to endure it remains less and less. Time will pass, and she will no longer be able to move forward, because there will be nowhere to go. The bottomless and cold abyss is approaching. And the understanding that even the chosen ones are not immortal in this life has already firmly settled in her fragile heart. The heroine of the war. The Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tailed, but in reality she is still the same orphan who began her life in sad loneliness. And he will end it with betrayal. Don't wind yourself up. You're doing everything right. Naruto stopped at the intersection, which diverged into 5 streets, and let out an insanely heavy sigh. But that doesn't make it any easier for me. Sasuke should know. And Kurama didn't even find anything to say to that. Human nature is far away for him. And to understand the logic of these bipeds, you need to live more than 1,000 years. But even then, he will not be able to understand the motives that guide their decisions. Receiving only silence in response, Naruto involuntarily grinned. Biju will always support, but this does not mean that the chosen path will be correct. Faceless houses were replaced one after another, and the first people gradually began to appear on the streets. Women, men, children, absolutely everyone smiled and greeted his savior with all cordiality. And Naruto willingly talked with these people in order to simply make up for lost time. The same time when she lived not in love, but in hatred and contempt. A smile, a kind word, a soft look, and here she comes into the hotel, where the Shursui chakra is felt. Yesterday Itachi treated him too cruelly. To quit and not explain anything, and what did he expect at all? That Shursui would just smile, wave and leave? No, of course not. He got angry, fell into a rage from the fact that his warm and very tender feelings were trampled on. As if the time spent together is just a dream, a mistake that it is desirable to leave in the past, which is what Itachi did. What for? The elder brother must support his Ototo and sacrifice everything for his happiness, he replied and fell silent, looking away. I'm not sure anymore. He understands that it doesn't make much sense, but at the same time he steadfastly tries to convince himself otherwise. But Naruto is not ready to put up with such blind sacrifice. And he's going to do everything to make these two reconciled. There was a loud knock on the door along the corridor, and Uzumaki froze in anticipation. But suddenly a familiar voice rang out on the other side. Eyebrows immediately closed in perplexity, but a bad feeling settled inside that everything had already been decided in this case. A moment that stretches for an eternity, and the door slowly opens. Naruto blinks, opens his mouth in amazement, and just can't believe what he sees. This is impossible. He's not like that. I wouldn't dare cheat with her, or could. Anino, and why are you here? And immediately fell silent when she realized that it was useless to ask. A man's T-shirt on Yamanaka's body is the most eloquent answer. And you don't even need words. Blue eyes filled with resentment and contempt slowly flowed over Ino's shoulder, where Shursui suddenly appeared. half naked, with a terribly rumpled look and shock on his face. It was as if he had just been caught doing something monstrous and illegal. It's good that he doesn't see it, and abruptly turned on her heels, rushing away as far as possible from this betrayal. How so? Why did Shisui do that? Doesn't Shisui love Itachi? Is it possible to forget everything that happened between them in one night? But if so, it turns out that Sasuke can act so inhumanly with her. Naru, wait, the girl even had to recoil back when the ghost himself suddenly appeared in front of her. Her body jerked, feeling his hands on her elbows, and her face unconsciously distorted with a grimace of disgust. She had once praised this man. I used him as an example. Naive. And now you're going to say that I misunderstood everything. What? No. Naruto fell silent, meeting the absolutely calm gaze of black eyes. And the worst thing is that she didn't see a drop of regret or guilt in them. Only composure bordering on bottomless emptiness. I wanted to say that you don't take our problems on yourself, sunshine. What happens between me and Itachi is only our business. So don't burden yourself and don't be angry with me. I don't want to lose you too. And, not noticing any resistance on her part, he gently pulled her to him, enclosing her in a ring of his hands. You understand, this is life. And it doesn't always happen the way we want it to. Small palms lay on the man's chest, and the girl with a heavy heart pressed her forehead to her faithful friend. But why is this life so cruel to us? Why should we suffer after all the trials we have passed, Dadabayo? When will it be our time to live? Suddenly, hot droplets of despair rolled down his chest, the appearance of which instantly broke his assumed confidence and determination. The wall of rejection cracked, and Shisui hurriedly pressed his lips to the top of the little sun. Small, sometimes terribly naive, but asking such difficult questions that he, an adult, cannot give an accurate answer. Why, maybe our destiny is to suffer so that others will be happy? After all, there is no world without victims. We will definitely be fine, Naru. You just have to believe. Salty droplets rolled into the corners of his lips, and for some reason his soul felt very sad and sad. After all, she hears the falseness in his voice. And she already knows for sure that it will never be good for her. A year or two will pass, and all hopes and dreams will be lost in the pitch darkness that will take away her tortured soul. A joyless end for a little orphan, and this is even somehow insulting. All my life to achieve something and in the end to get nothing. The streets are already filled with a lively and noisy atmosphere of a new day. The sun was shining at the zenith. And the two desperate people continued to stand in the middle of the empty corridor and huddle together, as if this could somehow help them cope with all the problems. Shisui, I can help you forgive Itachi. How? Abruptly pulled away from her, looking hopefully into two blue lenses. Naruto sniffed for the last time and ran her fingertips over her fluffy eyelashes with a smile. By telling the reason why my family is gradually collapsing. But I don't want to. You should all be happy, Dadabayo, at least you, Tsunagakure. Can you tell me exactly what you're looking for? Then the search circle would be significantly narrowed. Having covered another dusty Talmud, Gaara put it in its place and looked at Naruto in deep incomprehension. The girl, crawling up the stairs, studied the books available in the sand archive in the hope of finding the right one. The vaults of Konoha, Kumo, and even nearby countries have long been rummaged up and down. But no matter how much time she spent on these pointless searches, all the books found on her problem said only one thing: impossible. And if at first Naruto was ready to howl, tear her hair out of despair, now she just resigned herself. And why drive yourself into something that cannot be changed? Since Kami has decided so, she will just accept her fate. Even if you want the opposite. Sighing heavily, the girl jumped down and only after a few minutes of doubt nodded in agreement. With Kazekage she has more chances. All the information on the Biju chakra. And preferably with reference to Hagoromo. Gaara immediately frowned, folding his arms over his chest. Why do you need it? He asked, puzzled, to which the girl mentally snorted. Peace, capture, she thought, and at the same moment took a deep breath. But this is already a bad sign. He begins to lose control of his emotions, to get angry. It doesn't matter, she blurted out rather sharply, moving towards a table littered with a lot of books. And, don't ask questions. I'm sick without you right now. Suddenly, the whole body shuddered from hellish pain, the epicenter of which was the stomach. Naruto staggered dangerously and tried to grab a nearby chair with her hand. But from the fact that his vision was blurred, and the whole world was painted in an unbearable color of pain, thin fingers grabbed only air. There was a feeling of flying, and then everything stopped abruptly and only the poisonous flame spread through the chakra canals. Naruto? What are you? Clutching the girl to him, Gaara sank down with her on the floor and stared at his friend's too pale face in insane alarm. Slightly trembling fingers touched the corner of her mouth, from which a hot trickle of blood suddenly flowed. His heart ached painfully, the turquoise of his eyes was sated with fear of this sudden semi-fainting. With me, everything is fine, and exhaled long when the fox began to slowly remove all the pain. While he can do it, but time will pass, and even his strength will not be enough. And then she will know what real agony is, it seems to me. Gaara frowned into Uzumaki's dimmed eyes, after which he tried to pick her up in his arms. But as soon as he set out to take her away from here, as soon as he made it clear that he wanted to take her to the hospital, Naruto abruptly came to her senses, the pupils suddenly narrowed, and the fingernails lengthened, painfully digging into the elbows of the guy. It's all right with me, she rapped out every word in a growling voice, and then roughly pushed the confused Kazekage away from her. It's better to take Biju to the chakra department. I don't have time. After these words, Gaara pressed the girl quite hard to his chest and, grabbing her chin, approached her once clear face. But it used to be full of kindness and cheerfulness. And now his eyes see only anger and a certain emptiness that seeps through a dense mask of coldness. And when did you manage to become like this? What, Dadabayo? She hissed angrily, feeling the rage already bubbling inside. How hatred of this world penetrates into every cell of her burning body. And as an ordinary insult breaks a fragile heart. She could still do so much, achieve so much. However, the fate of the villain ordered otherwise, making Naruto what she has always been considered. Weapons, and when the need for it disappeared, it was time to get rid of unnecessary junk. Not so naive? Not the fool everyone knew me to be? Gaara? And approached the guy so close that the tips of their noses began to touch. And heavy breathing, saturated with irritation and discontent, spread over a man's face with the realization the war has left nothing bright and kind. So stupid, he answered sadly, and unexpectedly for the girl, he put his hand on the back of her head. I'm worried about you. And I see that something is happening to you. Naruto even stopped breathing when Gaara suddenly pressed against her forehead, looking into her eyes with such regret? Or resentment? Tell me, is it all because of Sasuke? What? She replied in confusion, trying to distance herself from the guy. But the hand on the back of her head didn't even give her a chance to break this connection. Gaara held tight, as if he was afraid of losing her warmth. And that faint hope that he suddenly clung to. I heard that you started dating, even living. But it always seemed to me that you were just friends. The girl swallowed loudly in response and involuntarily pinched the fabric of her cloak with her fingers. What are you talking about, Dadabayo? She replied in a hoarse voice, which made Gaara involuntarily chuckle. So you've never noticed, and lowered his gaze to her fingers, the warmth of which he had forgotten. It had been so many years since the day he first met this girl. But Gaara still remembers the playful sparkle in her eyes. He remembers how she gave him a helping hand. As supported. Saved. And became a light in his dark life. He always loved Naruto Uzumaki, he just couldn't figure it out right away. And when I finally realized, it was too late. The war, the recovery time, and then another one appeared in her life. Sasuke Uchiha, you're really very naive, Naru, if you don't notice the obvious. The blue eyes widened in unprecedented shock when there was a feeling of something dry, but insanely warm on the lips. Her heart pounded on her chest with such force that Naruto didn't even dare to move. She didn't want to, she couldn't move in order to understand that this was reality, not her dream. And Gaara really kisses, not hugs, not a friend, but a guy, ahem. Gaara reluctantly opened his eyes and with all reluctance squinted at Sasuke, who suddenly appeared. No one was waiting for you here at all, he cursed mentally and slowly got to his feet, helping Naruto to get up from the cold floor. You read interesting books. The girl involuntarily twitched and hurried to hide her trembling fingers under her cloak when she was doused with such cold. Even anger at the fact that she dared to suck with others. She dared to touch herself, although she knows perfectly well that Uchiha will kill anyone who dares to pull his little hands to her. Hello, Sasuke, Gaara greeted him dryly, which immediately earned him a look full of hatred and contempt. I didn't expect to see you in my village. I decided to check on Naruto. And then she somehow stayed too long in her mission. And looked at Uzumaki with such condemnation that she instantly felt like the very last creature in the world. A traitor. The mission is already over, she replied in a low voice, then took a small step forward. And our conversation is not yet. Sasuke narrowed his eyes unkindly when Kazekage's hand suddenly blocked the girl's path, preventing her from leaving. And Naruto, like a naughty genin, only lowered her eyes to the floor, not daring to contradict such a strict voice. Don't complicate your life, Kazekage-sama. Better let the girl go. Otherwise. The head's lips suddenly twisted into a slight grin, but his eyes remained the same cold. Are you threatening the Kage of this village, Uchiha-sama? Feeling the air become heavy with a monstrous thirst for blood, Naruto hastily ducked under his arm and in one step overtook his stupid subject. Don't, step back, Dobe. He threw her hands off his shoulders and rather rudely led her behind his back. I'm not threatening the head of Suna, but the bastard who dared to encroach on my girlfriend's honor. Catching the gaze of the flaming Sharingan, Gaara involuntarily grinned and slightly tilted his head forward. And here's a chance to get rid of this damn Uchiha. Then please follow me. The village has only recently been rebuilt. Sasuke snorted with displeasure when the dog disappeared into the swirl of sand. And when his chakra began to be felt outside of Sunagakure, Uchiha briefly looked at his girlfriend and sighed that he didn't think that this moment would ever come. Well, you're a fool. They're going to destroy everything here now. And it will be your fault. Looking at the place where Sasuke had just stood, Naruto growled angrily and swept all the books with scrolls off the table with one movement of her hand. Long-term dust flew into the air, which then slowly settled on the whitened fingers. The girl clutched the edge of the wooden countertop, frantically trying to figure out what to do. After all, Ku is right, this fight is solely her fault. Therefore, she must stop her. But will I succeed? And with a shudder she looked at the drop of blood that fell on the yellowed parchment. Our time meeting the Uchiha's gaze, Naruto exhaled noisily and activated the Kurama mode at her own risk. My stomach immediately gave an unpleasant jump, and the tips of my fingers began to tingle dangerously. It can no longer keep this shape for a long time, every time its capabilities are reduced. And this immediately suggests bad thoughts. I repeat for the last time, they stopped. Otherwise, I'll show you what it means to make Jinchuriki angry. Sasuke only grinned crookedly at this, after which he ran goosebumps down the woman's back in a cold voice. And you and I haven't sparred for a long time, Dobe. And here is such an opportunity. I think I'll say no to you. No. The girl mentally groaned and at the same second felt a stinging pain begin to spread through the chakra canals. My thoughts turned into a real whirl, and my body seemed to be paralyzed, and Uchiha suddenly broke from his seat. The fight has begun. Noticing that Sasuke rushed to his own girlfriend, Gaara already wanted to stand up for her, when suddenly there was no need for this. Uzumaki, not finding a better way out of this situation, just fainted. Theatrical, of course. But even this performance was enough for Uchiha to forget about his stupid jealousy. Susanoo was immediately deactivated, and Dobe's fragile body was lowered to the ground with all care. Fear, panic, misunderstanding, and then relief when he saw the blue eyes again, woke up. She needs to go to Irionen. Raising his eyes to the crouching opposite Kage, Uchiha confused Yugonal and without further ado pressed his beloved to him. And then, in deep confusion, he listened to her quiet request, take it to the hotel, and now Sasuke for some reason did not want to resist the will of Uzumaki. As if he was afraid that the hospital might not tell him the most welcome news. After all, people don't faint just like that. There are always reasons for this. And sometimes in their nature there may be a ticket to Shinigami. Gaara sighed heavily as the pair disappeared over the horizon. Naruto didn't say which hotel to take her to, so Sasuke decided that the best choice would be the one that is located away from Suna. And the future corpse, which he will surely bury under his own sand. And what's going on with you, Naru? He shook his head and Shunshin was transported to the residence, where he immediately sat down to write a letter to an old friend. More precisely, a friend who should know the reason for such suspicious behavior of Uzumaki. Deliver the letter to Konohagakure. And urgently. The silence of the dead of night descended on the border town, located just a few kilometers from Sunagakure. The dark sky was strewn with a whole scattering of bright lights, and the once busy streets plunged into a peaceful silence. The city was asleep. And only Sasuke couldn't close his eyes. Consciousness categorically refused to go to Uncle Morpheus. Heavy and joyless thoughts did not want to give him such a welcome peace. They only harassed the Uchiha, forcing him to sink deeper into an insanely bitter realization. Suddenly, from the side of the entrance to the hotel room, there was a quiet creaking of hinges. Naruto is back. The corners of his lips lifted, and Sasuke turned his head to his goddess with a sigh. So fragile and innocent on the outside, but dangerous on the inside. Beautiful, beloved, but not experiencing the same feelings as him. She doesn't like him, she just lives with him. As if in gratitude for many years of friendship and support. Or as a favor. Or maybe it's easier for her. Why aren't you sleeping yet, Dadabayo? Naruto briefly looked at the guy who was sitting on the windowsill, then walked over to the bed. His hands pulled off the towel covering her nakedness, and Sasuke involuntarily swallowed. And then he hurried to turn away to the window, when the thought flashed in his head like a bright flame, she would never belong to him. The knuckles turned white, and the Sharingan turned red in the eye without permission. Maybe there is no point in all this? Maybe you need to let go before it's too late? To not torment each other. A bitter smile fell on his lips, after which Uchiha threw his head back. Itachi also loves Shisui. He doesn't talk about it, apparently he's shy. But it immediately becomes clear from the eyes, these two are sick of each other. He's not even sure it's love, addiction. Illness, maybe, but then what about him and Naruto? What will this relationship lead to? I'm really ready to destroy the world for you. The girl chuckles softly and turns in his direction. Don't touch the world, and he says it with such irony that the guy involuntarily smiles. You can't stay angry at this dobe for a long time. One can only regret that nature has made it perfect. You know, when I saw you with Gaara, I realized one thing. A small shiver runs down his back when he feels her near him. She moves so quietly, like a fox. She tries to hide, to get within striking distance, but he still feels her. He feels a sweet fragrance, in which all his favorite things are intertwined. He feels an intoxicating warmth emanating from her. But at the same time, he can never catch the very note that would help him calm down. And what did you understand there? Topic, what? And all the words are covered with a thick crust of surprise when soft lips suddenly touch his cheek. They put their hand on the other half of the frozen face, and gently turn it to themselves. Sasuke freezes, he can't believe what he saw. He does not believe his feelings and thoughts. He just looks at the naked creature in front of him and somehow tries to understand why. Why all this tenderness if she doesn't love him? An ordinary concern? The desire to be useful. The hand intercepts the thin wrist, and the guy walks away from such a welcome kiss. Her breath was already on my lips. But he still wouldn't let her touch him, wouldn't let her bind him even more tightly into this senseless bond. She won't love him anyway, eventually she'll leave for someone else. And he is not ready to suffer later because of his own naivety. It's better to leave than to suffer later, tell me. He whispers softly, forcing Naruto to tilt his head to the side. There is so much despair in his eyes, so much regret and confusion that she wants to cry. I want to go back to change everything. Make it better. To help. To rescue. And give a chance for a happy life. But, she can't, because her time will soon come to an end. And then her lot will be hopeless darkness and dreary silence. Just like when I was a kid, and falls silent when an absurd thought suddenly comes to mind. The legs descend from the windowsill, the hands attract this angel to themselves. And then, looking her straight in the eyes, Sasuke speaks uncertainly. He is afraid, does not want to hear a negative answer, but still voices something that will help him calm down. Naruto Uzumaki, will you marry me? Asterisk fingers squeeze her thin fingers until they crack, and puppy hope lights up in her eyes. Deep down, he believes she will say yes. But for some reason, a bad feeling is spreading inside that these are just his naive dreams. Married? And my heart stops when she looks away. Thinks, frowns, refuses. An excruciatingly slow second is replaced by an equally long hitch. She's silent, she doesn't say anything. But you can understand a lot from her face. Naruto has never been able to hide her emotions. Too naive and kind. And from this it becomes somehow sad in a special way, because her emotions speak for themselves. This is very unexpected, but... I agree, Databeo. Really? Surprised, even amazed by what he heard, this was not the answer he expected. The head tilts to the side, and Naruto smiles cheerfully. Shackles the guy around the neck, snuggles up to his body, and then says embarrassedly, "Do you think I'm going to lie like this, topic?" And Sasuke immediately looks down at her breasts. And he had already forgotten that she was without clothes. So open and accessible. And most importantly, all the frown is instantly washed away with a sly grin, and literally in a moment the girl finds herself on the already warmed windowsill. She groans in surprise, blushes from his hungry gaze, but sits meekly, allowing her to enjoy her beauty. 2 fingers close on her chin, and Sasuke pulls her to him. He looks straight into her eyes, looks imperiously, even haughtily, but at the same time touches her so carefully that a small tremor breaks through the whole body. Naruto shakes with surging emotions, bursting with a burning desire to feel the full depth of his love. But she just obediently sits and waits for herself to be presented to her. In the lower abdomen, everything tightens from the painfully sweet languor when dry lips touch the neck. Weightless, almost imperceptible, but it's enough for her to drown in her own feelings. The breath is lost, saturated with an unquenchable desire. And every cell of her trembling body, every fiber of her soul reaches out for his touch. Sasuke is gentle, unhurried. He kisses his way down to his heaving chest, licks the velvety skin, trying to get enough of this girl at least a little. And with his hands he slowly studies every curve of her perfect figure. The fingers, roughened from numerous battles, outline the hips, slide over the stomach, tracing the place where the seal once flaunted. And they touch women's breasts with special trepidation. The guy's heavy breathing burns, and the wet and hot tongue is brought to a real hysteria, which it is impossible to keep to yourself. Naruto sobs. He runs his hand into the stiff hair and forcibly pulls the Uchiha for a kiss. And he does not mind, allowing him to take possession not only of his mouth, but also of his heart, which Sasuke is ready to tear out of his chest even now. But he is only drowning in the hot and intoxicating passion of his beloved and dissolves every moment in the thought that there is happiness after all. And he found his own a long time ago, and I just got it now. The hips forcefully clamp the inflated torso, and Naruto clings closely to the body of her future husband, frantically trying to tear off his T-shirt, but the damn clothes won't budge, which is why Sasuke can't help but grin. He gently interrupts the kiss and looks into the eyes of his beloved with a mischievous twinkle. Now there is no emptiness there is no sadness and misunderstanding of what she should do. At the moment, he sees only unwavering determination and desire. She wants him, and Sasuke helps his beloved fulfill one of her little dreams. Rips off his t-shirt, allowing the moonlight to shine on his skin, brings his hands to his pants and suddenly freezes when the girl's movements suddenly become constrained. It's like she's afraid of it. The corner of her lips lifts, and the guy gently slides his knuckles along her cheekbone, forcing her to look into his eyes. And then he says, quietly and quite confidently, "Don't be afraid." Lemon again. There was a rather tense silence in the office of the presenter Irionen Konohagakure. A simple clock hung on the wall, striking his ears with a booming tick. A gusty wind howled outside the window, carrying gloomy clouds over the village. Lightning flashed somewhere in the distance, which made the already bad mood fall even lower. As if nature itself wanted to spoil this solemn moment, well, Sakura sighed heavily and put the results on the table, the data of which did not please her at all. And she had warned her friend that this was fraught with consequences. Yes, only someone decided to do it their own way, as always. I think Naruto can tell you herself. Yes, dear? And she turned her disapproving gaze to her friend, who was sitting opposite her. Continuing to look at her fingers, Uzumaki cautiously squinted sideways and immediately met her eyes, burning with hope. And a plea for everything to be confirmed. Sasuke was next to her, looked only at her, and with all his appearance said that he wanted to get a positive result. After all, then his little dream will come true, and he will become the happiest man on earth. Yes, Sasuke, I'm pregnant. A moment of confusion, and Uchiha exhales with restraint, exulting in her soul, like the last kid. He's going to be a father. Father. And from the girl you love. Isn't this happiness for a man who has lost his whole family and gone through a war? Wait to rejoice, Uchiha. Nara didn't tell you everything. After these words, Uzumaki abruptly raised her head and stared into her friend's angry eyes with a pleading look. It is necessary. He has the right to know. Haruno coldly besieged her and showed with a menacing look that she would do it herself if Naruto did not dare. I should have thought earlier. Catching some tension between the former teammates, the guy was wary. And only after a minute of silence he asked rather uncertainly, "About what?" Sakura sighed in response when she realized that Uzumaki wasn't going to talk. She lowered her head again, as if this would help avoid a serious conversation. I'm dying, topic. The eyes instantly widened in horror, and the whole body was shot through with such a painful blow that Sasuke fell out of reality for a second. My heart was pounding like crazy, and the aristocratic pallor of the Uchiha was replaced by a painful shade, a shade of fear before such frightening news. How? Hoarse voice croaked, gradually feeling consciousness leaving his body. It's too hard news, considering the joy that was brought to him before. That's the thing, we don't know. Sakura sighed heavily and leaned back in her chair, looking hopelessly at her friend. But she was trying to find a way to cure her. But, alas, everything turned out to be in vain in front of a disease that does not exist in their reality. We assume that the malfunction in the body occurred during the transfer of the power of Hagoromo. Apparently, the body experienced a powerful load and after the war, began to collapse. All blood counts are off the scale, and the chakra canals are gradually dying off. And you must understand that a person cannot live without a chakra, and looked at the deathly pale Sasuke, who listened to her and looked at one point that I looked and didn't understand why. Why didn't Naruto inform him earlier? Why did you hide it? Didn't want to hurt? Or what? No treatment known to us helps, so, how much? Naruto guiltily squinted at the guy who found out about it too early. It would be better if this news came as a surprise. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it's cruel. But it is better to live a little in happiness than to spend all this time running around in search of treatment. There is no way to save her, and you need to put up with it. It was necessary, because now she is pregnant. Until the moment of conception of the child, she would have lasted another 3 or 4 years. Maybe even 6 if I was on supportive medications. But, given her situation, this period has been significantly reduced. And I'm afraid that much. After all, the fetus will become a great stress for the dying. Sakura abruptly stopped talking when Sasuke suddenly jumped up from his chair, knocking him over. Are you serious right now? And I was even more horrified when none of the girls even gave a hint that it was a joke. Yes, they decided to prank him. Apparently for something in my distant childhood. We were just offended then, and now we decided to remember, to play on the most important fears of Sasuke Uchiha. Yes, you are. Suddenly, everything swam before his eyes, and his consciousness instantly drowned in the terrible images of his future, without Naruto, and I told you that you need to tell him. Sakura growled angrily and, getting up from the chair, moved towards the guy who had fainted. On the way, she grabbed a jar of ammonia, which was immediately taken away, stopping her with a pleading look. Don't, Dadabayo. Let him stay unconscious. Sighing, Haruno stood in thought for a while longer, but then she finally returned to her seat. As soon as her friend made it clear that she would not interfere with her, Naruto created a couple of clones and sent Sasuke home with them. There they will have a very serious conversation. And what are we going to do? Haruno clasped her fingers in a lock and stared expectantly at her stupid friend. Uzumaki, after seeing Uchiha off with a guilty look, closed the door and looked down at her stomach with immense sadness. I'll last 9 months, she replied in a low voice, causing something to jump painfully in the area of the heart. Sakura involuntarily squinted at the half-empty bottle of sake. She would have liked to drink it now. When the baby is born, the 9-tailed one will be reprinted, but you're going to die right away, she interrupted, stunned, having come to a deep amazement at such a decision. Save a demon by sacrificing yourself? This is stupid. Don't, Ku. I decided that a long time ago. You don't have to die with me. It's better to take care of this baby. The fox only obediently bowed his muzzle, fully accepting such a decision. To dissuade, to object is no longer much sense. Now we need to support and help to reach this fateful day. Sasuke won't forgive you, Haruno continued when only silence came in response. Naruto smiled sadly and, turning back, looked at her friend with all gratitude that he won't have a choice. See you later, Sakura. Bye, she replied dejectedly, left completely alone. And when no one else was left in the office, Haruno hurriedly got up from the table and purposefully moved to her sedative. It's urgent, a drink. Suddenly, a falcon flew through the open window into the office. The bird sat down on the back of the chair and showed with a loud cry that it had brought a message. Urgent. With a chuckle, the girl put the bowl back in place and, approaching the unexpected guest, took the message from Suna from him. His fingers quickly opened a small scroll, and his gaze immediately fell on the neatly written letters. I was looking for Biju. Granny Chia has a closed library. Somehow she screamed loudly, which made the falcon involuntarily twitch. But the girl didn't even notice it, because now she was more worried about the message she had brought. And news that could help Uzumaki, but, isn't it too late already? Over Konoha, who had fallen into a deep sleep, the night canvas was spread out, dotted with many bright lights. From the direction of the forest came the soft rustle of withered leaves, which immersed the village in its bright yellow shroud. Winter was approaching. Cold winds began to blow from the northern borders, and the weather grew more gloomy and sad every day. The sun was hiding behind a gloomy firmament, hiding its soft warmth from the world. And the air became so dank that the feeling of approaching tragedy did not cease to expand in my soul. That it seemed as if the whole world stopped fighting overnight and sailed along that grey and empty current in which Sasuke had not stopped floundering for 9 months. The spatial matter in the bedroom was distorted, and literally in a moment a bloody hand grabbed the edge of the table. Uchiha fell to his knees on the floor and with incredible difficulty reached for his back, from which a fragment of a sword was sticking out. Slightly trembling fingers closed around the handle, after which, in one sharp movement, they tore out the cold metal. There was a hiss, and then a muffled clink bounced off the walls. Taking a deep breath, Sasuke somehow untied his tattered cloak and with a sigh looked at the ragged heaving chest. Blood dripped onto the wooden floorboards, gradually accumulating into a small puddle. He opened up. He allowed his fears and anxieties to take over. And for this now I have to drag myself to the bathroom, staining the cold walls with blood. Mentally curse myself for such a weakness. And, hope she doesn't see his condition. His hand rested on the metal handle, and Sasuke sighed hopelessly, feeling her anxious gaze on the back of his head. I told you to sleep, not wait for me, he said coldly, then opened the door to the bathroom. So that she wouldn't see his condition. And, to escape from a frightening thought. I'm worried, Dadabayo. The guy froze in indecision when a small palm suddenly landed on his shoulder. Tired eyes, under which deep bruises lay, were filled with sadness. And Sasuke desperately looked back, looked to where the most important weakness in his life stood. A vice of pain closed around his heart, and his soul felt so lousy and disgusting that he wanted to lower his hands. I wanted to look at this world, saved, prosperous, and ask with a bitter smile, for what? Why should those who help this reality survive suffer? Why are two souls obliged to suffer for the sins of all mankind? Why? It's too late. You need, and he falls silent when he is hugged from behind with immense warmth and tenderness. Soft lips are touched to the cheek, and a rounded stomach rests against the lower back, the feeling of which instantly brings him happiness. The corners of his lips twitch. Even from here he can feel his child. But not even on the physical level, it seems to him that somewhere deep, deep inside, in the back of his mind, a child's voice is heard. And Sasuke is trying to hear, trying to understand what this child wants from him. But each time it ends with the same thing, the bitter realization that this is just his paranoia. That fateful hour is approaching, and consciousness begins to play tricks on him. And he's already used to it. He's tired of watching his beloved son fade every day. Mentally tired. Tired of the part of the soul that dies with Naruto, and when she is gone, then this half will irrevocably perish. Let me help, Dadabayo, gently whispers, with special trepidation leads along his protruding cheekbone, looking into cold eyes in supplication. And Sasuke doesn't resist in any way, he just goes inside, trying not to look at her face. He looks down at his stomach. Naruto's pregnancy is to his face. The angel has become even more beautiful. But he would have been talking like that all the time, shouting at every corner, if this very angel hadn't been dying. And so pregnancy became her sword of Damocles. Soon he will fall, and then the bright light will fade forever, making his life absolutely faceless and cold. There will be no more ringing laughter and bright smiles. There will be no joint gatherings and conversations about anything. There will be no warmth that she gave him at night. Naruto takes off his scarred t-shirt, gasps in fright, noticing the striated chest. And he doesn't even react to her emotions. He looks anywhere, but not at the haggard face, which now causes him only horror. Why drive yourself like this, Dadabayo? He whispers reproachfully, trying to give his voice at least a little firmness. But as the fingers slide over the cut, bloody, punctured chest, all confidence disappears somewhere. And unbidden tears come to my eyes. Uchiha twitches when a sob suddenly comes from her side. His mouth dries up, and his heart is pierced by such a cutting pain that he also wants to cry. I want too many things. But he just stands in front of his wife and, like a coward, looks anywhere but at her. I was at Sakura's today. The breath freezes, and the guy puts his palm on the rounded belly, which instantly turns red with blood. Horror freezes in my eyes, and images of my beloved lying in a pool of her own blood instantly flash in my head. Clutching his dead daughter to his chest, no, in fear, he steps back, staggers, feels the ground go away from under his feet, and then just falls on the tiled floor. His hands are buried in his hair, and Sasuke desperately looks somewhere into the void. He hears nothing, feels nothing, as if he died overnight. Just like his beloved, who will soon leave him forever. And he will take away all the bright and good things that happened in his life. What are you doing? An empty gaze rushes up and immediately dissolves into dimmed eyes the color of the sky, which hangs over him like a kite. What did Haruno say? He shakes his head, regaining his small-scale calm, and then rises from the floor when he realizes that his beloved cannot be frightened now. She's already weak, he's also with his emotions. And he looks down at his fingers, which he begins to sort through the fabric of a shapeless t-shirt. He is silent, does not dare to say, and Sasuke immediately understands. There is practically no time left. Taking a deep breath, Uchiha approaches Naruto and presses his lips to her forehead with a heavy heart. I'll ask Itachi to sit with you. And I have to go. Uzumaki squints and sobs loudly when the door closes behind the guy. He left her alone again. And all for the sake of a non-existent medicine. But what kind of salvation can there be when the body has practically stopped working? When even a fox is not able to stop the destruction of its shell. I'm sorry, Naruto, Kurama growls dejectedly and weakly lowers his muzzle on his paws. He can't do anything else, his possibilities have run out. You should lie down for safekeeping. Otherwise, the hand rests on the rounded stomach, and the legs themselves carry her away from this apartment. The fox is right, there is practically no time left. A day or two, maybe 3, and then the gates to Shinigami will open for her and Naruto is already ready to plunge into the cold void. But before that, I must take care of people dear and beloved to my heart. And then it will be possible to leave this mortal world, releasing your soul to eternal rest. One of the dimensions of Kageyashirsue walked up to the entrance of the abandoned temple and with a heavy sigh examined the ancient writings stamped on the arch. Do you think there's something here? And out of the corner of his eye he glanced at Sasuke standing next to him, whose appearance left much to be desired. His face was covered with a lot of abrasions, his right hand was pressed to his chest, apparently a rib was broken, and his face was so pale that it seemed that he would just collapse from impotence. But despite the general weakness, Sasuke continued to endure steadfastly not only heavy thoughts and his multiple, bleeding wounds, but also the fierce frost, penetrating to the bones. The guy shivered and moved with a determined step to the entrance to the cave. Overcoming the pain and obvious lack of joy of this world. His feet sank into the loose snow every now and then, and a prickly wind tingled his wounded face. But Sasuke did not even dare to think about stopping, because there was simply no time for this. Sighing, Shisui moved after his companion, who had no sense in asking such a question, because what is at stake is not some kind of salvation of the world, but much more, the life of a loved one. The foot stepped on the stone floor, dusted with snow, and the genius of the clan at the same moment felt his shoulders squeezed by something heavy. There was no more air, the picture in front of my eyes flowed with streaks, and a persistent feeling of emptiness settled inside my chakra, he whispered dumbfounded when the Sharingan suddenly deactivated. Something is blocking it, and he directed an inquiring glance at Sasuke, who was standing at one of the walls, peering inquisitively at the drawing stuffed in the rock. Nothing is unclear and invisible, but with some sixth sense he understood that it was in this cave that he would find what he was looking for. You just need to walk down the dark corridor and see what is inside, their salvation, or a curse. Without saying anything, the guy tore off a stick from the wall, frozen to the torch, and, having built a kind of torch, he dispersed the darkness of the cold cave with a bright flame. Ominous shadows ran along the walls, peering into every recess of the rock, and the eyes of both Uchi rushed to an inconspicuous tunnel. And here is our road to Shinigami. Shisui exhaled heavily and, having no other choice, went for the light of a burning torch. The chilly wind stirred the warming flames, the rustle of small pebbles could be heard from under the sole, and in front, where a frightening unknown awaited them, it was quiet and, dead to the goosebumps. The genius of the clan cautiously looked around, listened and did not take his hands off his tanto for a moment. His every move was imbued with boundless fear that the next step might be the last. It's not just that there is protection from the chakra here, Kaguya wanted to protect this place. And this already forced me to be damn vigilant and wary. The light of the torch rounded another arch, and Sasuke stopped in surprise when he saw what they were so diligently moving towards. The library, the elder Uchiha whispered dumbfounded, seeing a real storehouse of information. The gaze of black eyes outlined the many shelves installed on the walls. And as countless books and scrolls of all kinds came to my eyes, a persistent understanding was born inside. There must be what I was looking for, but do they have time to review this library completely? Not having a chakra, Sasuke abruptly shook his head, pushing away the images of the most terrible nightmares, and with a determined look headed deep into this cave. He has no other choice, his beloved must survive. Take the left part, and I'll take the right. And hurry up, Shisui. Something tells me that we have practically no time left. He gripped the torch shaft until his knuckles turned white, rushing to the last stronghold of their salvation. After all, even if there is no information on Naruto's illness here, then everything will come to an end. Itachi was pacing the hospital corridor with nervous steps when his Ototo literally flew through the door. Noticing Sasuke and Shisui returning, the brunette exhaled and without further ado grabbed his brother by the elbow, pulling him to the operating room. His legs were stumbling, his heart turned into a crazy motor, and his eyes were glazed with such palpable fear that Itachi allowed himself a brief smile. Just twitched the corners of his mouth to somehow support Ototo. But even this weak, painfully forced gesture was enough to settle a fragile hope in the heart. What's with Naruto? We were told that Gaara has arrived from Suna with very good news. Itachi gently confirmed all his brother's thoughts, and then stopped in front of the entrance to the operating room. Let's hope it works and, it's not too late. Hearing the last and most frightening word, Sasuke did not even hesitate. In the blink of an eye he disappeared behind the doors, leaving Itachi and Shisui alone. With their fears, and unspoken words, the door closed quietly, and the guys involuntarily looked at each other. In the area of the heart, something painfully jumped, after which Shisui silently, with just a glance, asked to explain what they managed to get, since such hope is burning in the eyes of a friend. Did Kami take pity on them and personally gave salvation for their son? Kazekage found a very ancient scroll that says how to help Naruto. But? Shisui cautiously asked again, feeling how the soul itself was trembling with fear of hearing a frightening answer. After all, there is only a step left before that fateful hour, one moment that separates them from the tragedy. And if now even this fragile chance does not help, then, why live at all if such innocent creatures leave this world? Catching an anxious look at himself, Itachi retreated to the wall and powerlessly slid down it to the floor. His legs bent at the knees, and his eyes, filled with fear, were directed somewhere into the bottomless void, into the cold darkness, where Naruto's chakra still glowed. But she was already so fragile and weak that hope was melting frighteningly fast with every passing moment. It was as if Shinigami himself was standing over the soul of this angel, anticipating the imminent replenishment in his dead kingdom. If everything works out, then Naruto and Sasuke, they will no longer be able to be shinobi. What does Sasuke have to do with it? Shisui frowned in puzzlement, silently moving towards his friend, who only smiled bitterly at this. And then, with a shudder, he looked at the operating room, from where a powerful wave of ki swept through the entire building. It started because Ototo is the only person who can help her. The shirt falls on a chair, after which Sasuke resolutely lies down on the bed prepared for him. The head falls on a soft pillow and immediately turns towards the unconscious Dobe. Naruto is lying nearby, lying so close, but at the same time far away. An immensely tender smile freezes at the corners of his lips, and his hand reaches out to the one that has become a light for him. But they still don't let him reach it. It's not supposed to, it interferes. Sorry, Sasuke. The eyes glimpse Sakura standing next to her, and then rush back to the pale face of her beloved. And now he is ready to look only at her, he is ready to believe that there is a place for a real miracle in this world, there is an opportunity to be happy. Nothing, she says softly and warmly, accepts support from her friend, squeezing her palm tightly. He is grateful to her, grateful for everything she has done for them. And if today she manages to create a miracle, Sasuke will extol this girl all his life. Just do it, and give my girls a chance at a good life. The look blurs, soaps, and literally in a moment Uchiha closes her eyes, taking with her the image of Tsunade and his son. He trusts these people, and knows for sure that they will be able to bring Naruto back to life. Sakura sighed softly, noticing that Sasuke had fallen asleep, and then nodded her head to Sensei. They can start. Experiencing a slight jitters, Tsunade took another look at the scroll she received and only then was able to bear Uzumaki's stomach. The hand confidently took the sharp scalpel from the table, and the woman with a sigh brought the blade to the delicate skin. A ruby droplet rolled onto the operating table. Then let's pray to Kami that today this operation does not take the lives of 3 people at once. Senju pressed on the blade. There was a deathly silence in the operating room and the human subconscious. 1 hour was followed by the second. Waiting killed faster than a mortal wound received in battle. There was practically no strength left, as well as the desire to endure this unbearable weight of the unknown. The neighborhood was too quiet and silent. And even the flashes of the chakra stopped spreading from the operating room, as if everyone in this damn room had died a long time ago. What will you do if Nara dies? Shisui involuntarily shuddered when he heard Itachi's empty voice. And then, unexpectedly for himself, unexpectedly for him, he put his hand on the shoulders of his faithful comrade. Friend. Brother. And most dear to the heart of man, in order to share with him all the burden of this day. She won't die, he said decisively, and for some reason Itachi believed him. Maybe he just wanted these words to be true. Or maybe he saw in the eyes of a friend, a loved one, such unshakable confidence that all fears were gone for a moment, allowing him to cling to a fragile hope. Then what will you do when? The corners of his lips lifted, and the older Uchiha pressed his forehead to Itachi's temple, forcing him to smile gratefully. And now it didn't even take words to understand. He will stay, and will support no matter what. Suddenly, a soft rustle came from the entrance to the operating room. The guys jumped up from the floor and stared at the cherished doors in mad impatience. A minute passed, then a second, and then the metal handle dropped, and a strong smell of medicines and blood hit the nose, and only then did a reassuring sound reach their ears: baby crying. 6 years later, John Hopkins, abandoned window. A warm spring breeze blew in through the window, stirring her jet-black hair. His nose involuntarily wrinkled, and Sasuke rolled over to the other side, stretching out his hand to the other half of the bed. Empty. The guy didn't even have time to understand anything, as he was already on the floor, dumbfounded, looking around the bedroom of his house. Images of the most terrible nightmares were still spinning before my eyes, but inside everything was gradually coming into balance. It was just a dream. All the worst is over. Grinning, Sasuke ruffled his hair and looked at the calendar with a sigh. So a new spring has come. A new day, new horizons for discoveries. But not for him anymore, but for those who are just starting the next chapter of their quiet and, most importantly, happy life. From the direction of the corridor came a loud trampling, and here is his baby elephant running. And just a moment later, a black-haired hurricane burst into the bedroom, the appearance of which caused Sasuke to smile immensely. Warmed up, "Daddy," Hands picked up the girl who ran up to him, and Uchiha immediately turned his cheek for a morning kiss. The children's lips pressed against the prickly cheek, and then the most native and beloved voice sounded at the very ear, "You almost overslept. And today is actually my first day at the academy." And, listening attentively to his hyperactive baby, Sasuke went out into the corridor and followed the smell of food on pure instincts. He can no longer feel the chakra. How to be a shinobi. Neither chakra nor his Dojutsu. Only gratitude to fate for the opportunity to be happy. For the sake of saving his loved ones, he sacrificed everything. But at the same time I got something that is more expensive than any strength and power, and this is a family. The floorboard creaked treacherously under his foot, and soft laughter came from the stove. "And you're still trying to be secretive, Dadabayo." His heart fluttered like crazy, and Sasuke looked at his beloved son with all tenderness. Alive and absolutely healthy. But just as powerless, which didn't bother him at all. The main thing is that they are together. "Well, I have to set an example to the younger generation," and winked conspiratorially at his daughter, forcing her to whoop in agreement. "After all, she wants to be a Hokage with us. Does it remind you of anything, Dobe?" And, sitting down on a chair with the girl, looked ironically at his wife. Naruto just rolled her eyes at this, and how much he would remind her about it. She was young, stupid, but now she's grown up. And I saw the most important truth, which I diligently did not notice all my life. It doesn't take much to be happy, and the Hokage post would never have made her as necessary and beloved as she has become now. Only her daughter will look at her as a god. And to extol my dear husband as something priceless, given by fate itself, well, why are you thinking again, database? Naruto twitched when the voice of a little angel suddenly sounded near her. A smile hastily crept onto her face with a mustache, her head cleared of all uninvited thoughts, and the girl gently patted her baby's hair. Her daughter, whom she loves more than life. After all, it was she who helped her understand one very important thing. That "I'm just thinking about how quickly we will be called to the director." I filled the cups with hot tea and carried them to the table. You don't need to be reminded that the Ku chakra should not be used in the presence of others. Catching the narrowed gaze of blue eyes on herself, the girl pursed her lips and with an honest look began to look anywhere, but not at strict parents. "Yes, we overdid it a little, database," she mumbled softly, which made Sasuke unable to restrain a loud laugh. "Is that what you're laughing at?" Naruto glared angrily at her husband, who spoils the whole educational conversation. Suddenly, the sound of a closed door was heard from the hallway, which immediately became the signal for a deafening siren. Young parents hastily covered their ears, after which the Uchiha Uzumaki couple's house shuddered from the children screeching that "Uncle Itachi! Uncle Shisui! They're back!" As soon as the black-haired hurricane ran away from the kitchen, Sasuke pulled his beloved to him, forcing her to kneel down. Her hands tightly pressed this fragile flower to her chest, and her eyes, filled with love alone, dissolved into the blue of her pools. "The most beautiful and beloved. Someone didn't wish me a good morning," he whispered reproachfully, scorching his soft lips with hot breath. And from this very lips came a grin, which should have been followed by her thoughts about the morning, her daughter. And the one that bloomed on her heart like a real flower. But they have long forgotten about romance, because with children it is absolutely impossible. "Well, what are you doing here?" The girl winced, seeing her parents in a not very decent pose. And then, with puppy-like devotion, she snuggled up to her faithful horse. "Whose name is Shisui?" Noticing the guests, Sasuke briefly kissed his beloved on the lips, after which he hurried to greet the returning clansmen. Word by word, and a lively atmosphere spread out in the kitchen, filled with conversations, laughter, and lots of smiles. And, looking at all this, Naruto understands that the years allotted to her and Sasuke will be the most beautiful. After all, they will flow with people close and dear to the heart. She will see her daughter get her protector. He will be scared by letting her go on her first mission. She will cry when they quarrel for the first time. And then they will make up again, because the fox will not allow this little one to take offense at her mother. He will always support his new vessel. And take care of him as if he were her own child. Especially when beloved parents leave the life of this baby, but she won't be pining for them. To miss, yes. But in no case do not despise this world for the loss of relatives. Not to hate humanity, for the benefit of which such an expensive price was given, the lives of my parents, so, I went to conquer this world. Little hands adjusted the straps of the backpack, and the girl looked at her parents with a smile. Behind them, like two faithful guards, stood Itachi and Shisui, ready to protect their niece at any moment. And in front of two happy parents, shuddering waiting for the news soon. And something tells them that they will not be very welcoming. The daughter is still a fox, she took after her mother. I hope this world will stand up to your enthusiasm, Izanami, Sasuke ironically remarked, looking into his daughter's purple eyes. And she just rolled her eyes, waved her hand to her ancestors and went to the academy together with her nannies. The first day is the first dirty tricks to the villagers on the scale of a student. I think Konoha will not withstand such pressure. The young father grinned and closed the door behind the trio, sympathizing with the teachers in his thoughts. After all, even it is almost impossible for him to keep track of this little genius. A few years will pass, and then Izanami will become a truly formidable opponent. Given her Uchiha genes, Uzumaki and the presence of a nine-tailed under the arm, yes, after their death, it will be possible not to be afraid that someone will offend her. She will pick up and break her spines. The character of the grandmother, maybe it was not necessary for the fox, so, turning to his beloved, Uchiha abruptly fell silent, feeling his morning kiss on his lips. The body went limp from the sweetness of her warmth, and the guy smiled for the first time that he had the best wife on earth. And only him. We raised a lovely daughter. She clasped his face in her hands and looked into two bottomless pools with a smile. And from us she took over all the best and favorite. Then she pulled away, with a mysterious look, running away towards the bedroom. And Sasuke stood for another minute at a loss, trying to figure out what caused such a bright sparkle in his eyes. And I still couldn't explain where Naruto ran away so quickly. Deciding that he just hadn't woken up yet for complex thought processes, Uchiha moved with a leisurely step to the stairs, along which his dearest wife had so swiftly galloped away. But before he could put his foot on the step, blonde curls hung down from the second floor. Well, will I wait a long time, Dadabayo? In a feigned offense, she screamed, forcing the guy to smile. That's not at all a man has grown up. I confessed my love to him here, and he didn't even react in any way. The body froze, and the shocked gaze was directed to the place where the beloved had just been. The heartbeat jumped to unbearable beats per minute, the air somehow warmed up instantly, and the face distorted with sincere indignation. Sasuke snorted with displeasure when he managed to move away from the first shock. And at all times he rushed to a stupid girl, of whom a romantic is generally worthless. And who confesses in love like that, Dobe? Just like you deprived me of my virginity. And then a peaceful silence descended on the Uzumaki Uchiha house. Two happy souls met in a kiss, and the whole world suddenly ceased to exist, for them and their immensely tender feelings that will help them live the allotted time happily together. That's the end of it.